How's it going?
So are we looking at total Carnegie or PP brings it home?
I mean, okay, let's do this. What I'm gonna do, and we're just hopping right into it. We're just here to have a bit of fun.
Yeah, no transitions. Just go right in.
See, I'm looking at this. This is just a poll tracker, like at any corner store in Canada. It looks like a Mark Carney blowout, a Carnegie. This is what I was thinking of. I'm Dimes, by the way. Here's the thing. It's Wilhelm Apologist stream. I'm going to let him go first before I start fucking slapping my dick on the table here. Wilhelm, are you there? You know what? He might be having technical issues because he said that the intro was roboting for him before he went live. So, Wilhelm, I cannot hear you. You might need, if you need to restart your computer, go ahead and do that now. In the meantime, this is what we're looking at here, boys. And just before we continue, let me introduce everyone we got here. It's me. It's Dimes from Blood Satellite. We've got Ben over here. We've got Fortissax. Who doesn't love Fortissax? And we have Token Canadian, who I'm told has some hot insider gossip from what's going on with this entire election.
Well, there's a lot of things. I think usually CBC and most mainstream media won't call the election until like Ontario or Quebec starts coming in. But there's certain seats in Atlantic Canada that we can watch. And depending on that, how those seats go, we'll be pretty easily able to call it for either a Mark Carney minority or majority, or if the polls are really wrong, maybe a conservative minority, which would be extremely unlikely.
All right, so I'm just adding Wilhelm in right now. Sir, are you there?
Oh my gosh, my internet died. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's don't apologize. It's your show. You're the man with the plan. We've just been going over this here, these polls here. So
it could be worse. You could be living in Spain and the whole power grid could be out.
Apparently, Spain shut down, didn't it?
Yeah.
That's how I learned I have a Spanish fan. You just updated our chat with like the power's back on. You don't know you got Spaniards in the mix until a catastrophe, really. So we got a couple of comments here. Freedom-loving loyalists says, voting is too gay for me. Where do we stand on voting being gay, gentlemen?
I agree it's fake. I'm not sure if it's gay, but it's definitely fake.
It is fake. Now, PPC Wave as trans rights or human rights says gang squad. Controversial comments, but there's going to be a lot of good controversial comments in the chat. We're going to be throwing up on the screen. So don't be shy, everyone. We've got, oh, look at this. We got an American here. There's Americans watching this right now. There's a lot of American interest in this election. So, Wilhelm, how are you feeling today? Tell me, what are you feeling about this entire election? Who do you got?
I think it's kind of gay, honestly. Elections are a way to legitimize the system. I didn't vote.
Who here
good? You see ads on Twitter, and they say, "Pardon?"
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, who here voted?
No. I voted for PPC. That's pretty much spoiling my ballot, right?
I did too. Yeah, I also voted for PPC.
I just didn't vote.
Real.
So we got Wilhelm apologists can still win the erection. That's what they're saying on the street right now.
Les élections fédérales.
See, this is why we needed a bilingual panel, so I'm very happy Fortissax is here. See, look what we got here, 40. Bloc Québécois beating out the PBC, beating out the Green. How do you feel about that?
I feel pretty good. I gotta wonder if this is going to be a repeat of the 90s, or sorry, of the early 2000s, where there was a bloc opposition to a conservative majority government. I have to wonder if that's going to be the case. I can't remember what time that was, but it was around there. It was 90s or early 2000s, either Harper or his predecessor. And it was the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was Chrétien, who I thought it was 93 that Chrétien won with the bloc as the opposition.
Yeah, so the Bloc was the opposition, and they provided some pretty interesting pressure on the Conservative Party. Certainly better pressure than the Liberal Party is going to, or the NDP, or even the Greens.
I'm just reading some comments here. Wilhelm's computer is just like Canada, broken, says Jordan. You know how much money I had to pay to have good internet? Like, when you tell an American what you have to pay for good internet up here, it blows their fucking mind. It costs as much as a gun.
Yes, it does. Not only does it cost as much as a gun, you're paying for an internet infrastructure the equivalent to that of Kenya, because our infrastructure, and that's not even a joke, the internet infrastructure in Canada is literally that of a third world country due to how sparsely populated and spread out it is.
Robert says he's refusing to vote for someone with a French or Anglo last name. Give me a German or Dutch candidate. When's the last time we had a Dutch man as prime minister?
I don't think we ever have. We had a German.
We did. I'd be afraid to elect a Dutch guy. The only Dutch people I know hate Canada.
Yeah, do you have an idea what we did to them during the Boer War? I don't want them in charge of us.
Half the Germans in Canada are not exactly pro-Canada either.
Well, no, our German prime minister, Diefenbaker, the only one we had, he got rid of all ethnic quotas or restrictions on immigration in 1957. So that was the legacy of elected Germans in Canada.
That's it. There you have it. Krauts, get out.
Now, Wilhelm, we have a question here from Mitchy Peachy. Wilhelm didn't vote despite shilling for PPC for months. Explain this. LOL.
Okay, that's a good question. I only realized, like, after January that the PPC had been infiltrated by hostile elements. Like, all their writings in Brampton, and people, token Canadian can tell you this. They have Indians, and Maxime Bernier said that if we get a candidate from Brampton, that would be fine because they would win the ethnic vote of Indians. Like, I didn't realize how broken like the entire PPC structure was until very recently. So like supporting the PPC used to be funny. Like, people would say, you're going to split the vote. You're going to make the Conservatives lose. Like, okay, so what? The Conservatives are trash. But now,
well, the Conservatives deserve
it's
to
not
lose.
funny because you would be supporting Indians.
We got a good comment here. PPC is the future Reform Party in Canada. This is a truth nuke.
That's it, right? And the reason I voted PPC was, I mean, they're basically going to be a lesser, shittier AFD. They're not, it's just pressure on the system. It's effectively a political pressure group against the Conservatives at this point. Until a realistic alternative can emerge, something ideally like the Homeland Party. I was talking to Daniel Tyree actually on this subject, who used to be one of the deputies for the PPC, and he said that it's not a very well-run party. They're not very professional. The party heads are very much stuck into libertarian ideology, like Gen X, libertarian sort of boomerish ideology, and they don't really see that the writing's on the wall for that. There's nothing in that party that truly speaks to the Canadian character.
Now, I have a question here for Wilhelm from Dr. McGamer. Wilhelm, my good sir, will you start a based party for us then? If there's no other options, is that in the cards?
Good question. I know I talked about this in the video, Canada's not yet lost. But like, the reason a party isn't viable is because it would receive a lot of pressure. You can't organize an entire party apparatus that is contrary to the state, and like, not like the AFD or like what's her name in France, or the other lady in Italy.
National Rally.
Those parties are, in a way, they serve the state. A truly based party, would be the target of legal attacks, which would which would cost a lot of money, which the party wouldn't have, and also defectors who would leak internal things. Like, when you try to start such an organization, it's hard unless you have really good people to start it with. And right now, like, who's going to dedicate dozens of hours to starting a party that will ultimately be more costly to run than it will be useful. Like that's just not going to happen.
If you want to get all elite theory on this stuff, Robert Mitchell's, he wrote 100 years ago that there will never be a mass populist movement in the English-speaking world because it's just too easy to buy off the leader.
Fair enough.
Maybe, I had a question for Fortissax. What are your feelings on this? Smaller space for Bloc Québécois. Does size really matter, Fortissax, to you?
Listen, 5 seats is average.
That's 5 seats is average.
So, they only run candidates in the province of Quebec, so I don't really think it matters that they're leaning out their party presence in the province. As long as they get the majority of seats on a federal level in their province, where they have third position on a federal level, that's pretty much all they care about. Blanchet, unfortunately, does not want to be prime minister, though it would be kind of based if he was, if you disregard the rest of the woke policies that the Bloc Québécois have adopted over the years.
Now, I heard mention of something I've been hearing in the discourse for quite some time, that I see a lot of conservatives, especially in Canada, who are very, very angry at the PPC, then saying that they may very well rob Pierre of an easy victory. They're splitting the vote. Now, what do you think about all that? Anyone who's got any thoughts on whether or not that's actually happening?
I think it's cope, because if you look at the PPC's numbers, they've actually decreased in support and popularity, as well as in the polls. They're doing worse than they were in the last election in 2020, when they were capable of running candidates in all ridings, like every single federal riding across the country. PPC is not managing to pull that off. As far as I understand, that their funding is probably not as high as it used to be as well. So really, like, in my view, if the Conservatives lose, it'll be because of Poilievre's "a Canadian is a Canadian" rehash. It just so happens that after 10 years of a Liberal lost decade, where you flood the country with 5.5 million migrants, where we have no assimilation policy, that's saying whether your name is Poilievre or Patel, that's not going to fly, right? That's just a rehash of Canadian is a Canadian. That's tripling down on Pierre Trudeau's left liberalism and his cultural revolution. And I think that would be the moment. We're talking about a guy who went from a 30-point lead to going neck and neck with the Liberal Party. It's absolutely insane. And this happened in the course of 3 months.
I had a thought, and I'm curious to hear what everyone thinks about it. Like, to me, this might be the last gasp of the PPC as a party, because I mentioned this on a election stream I was on just this Sunday on Countercurrents with Greg Wycliffe and Endeavor. And so I might be repeating myself here, but I said the PPC is a very interesting party. I was early on in getting on board with the PPC. I was one of the first people and got a certificate to prove it, right? This was years ago. And it was never intended to be a dominant player, but you're hoping that it was some sort of political signal. Okay. But one thing I've noticed over the successive elections was there is no upward momentum. In fact, every election they've done worse and worse and worse, which surprised even me. So there doesn't seem to be any sort of positive trajectory for them, despite, and we were talking about this before the panel, Maxime Bernier did the podcast, or he was on Joe Rogan, he was on Patrick Bet David, all the worst guys, all the worst fucking shows, didn't go on any of ours. That could have helped him. But I look at this right here, he's doing worse than the Green Party. And when the fuck have you ever seen anyone from the Green Party say anything? And yet here it is. So they're going to be dead last. So that media tour did nothing. Exposure seemed to do nothing. So where is there to go from here for the PPC?
Nowhere.
I think that they're stuck in the ideological trappings of 2020 and of the COVID era, and also of their inherent classical liberal and libertarian tendencies. I don't think that Canadians respond to that. And quickly, if you look at the history of Canada, if you look at the fact that our ancestors were reactionary traditionalists who explicitly rejected classical liberalism, who emphasized a strong state, a strong community, and the value of order, not liberty, you kind of understand where this is coming from. Our economy was built on crown corporations. They were built on a mixed economy and high protective tariffs and a strong military and a centralized state. And the PPC has none of that. It's kind of like what Wilhelm said. The party is explicitly against the state, not just implicitly in its in what it represents, because really what it represents is more important than what the party actually is, in my view. But its actual ideological inclinations are just not congruent with the Canadian character. They're not congruent with Anglo-Canadians and French Canadians and the 400 years of history that they've lived here.
Now, token Canadian, I'd love to throw it to you because I know you probably can't stay for the entire thing, but I was wondering what your thoughts are on the party structure. Where do you see all this going? If indeed, well, or first of all, what do you think is going to happen, your prediction, and what do you think that means for the next, let's say, couple of years?
I think we're going to see a Liberal majority. Maybe not as big as was predicted at the beginning of the campaign, but I think it's going to be over 175 seats at the very least. I think what that means for Canada, for the most part, I think I'm not going to have much objection on here when I say I don't see much of a difference between Poilievre and Mark Carney. Like, actual ideological vision for Canada difference. Like, I don't mean like, oh, one of them supports a tax and the other doesn't or whatever. But even then, when you get into taxes, they have almost the same tax policy. But I mean, like, if you look at what they push for, they are both neoliberal, classical liberal, hardcore individualists that support the current system, the current way of things, and they have different minor tweaks. Like usually we'd use this as like a joke, like, oh, the conservatives want to lower income tax by 0.9 and the liberals want to lower it by 5. But it actually happened this campaign where Mark Carney came out and said he was going to cut income tax by 3%, and Poilievre came out and said, well, I'm going to cut income tax by 3.75%. Like, that made like this big difference. And that's like, those are the major differences between the main parties, that it's like a 0.75% income tax rate. Whereas Poilievre spent his first 2 years as leader talking about how Trudeau broke the immigration system because he wasn't letting in enough immigrants fast enough, and that there were too many refugees waiting that didn't have citizenship yet. Poilievre was the leader that when Trudeau was trying to deport 400 Indian foreign students for coming to Canada illegally, Poilievre was the guy that went to a rally organized by those 400 illegal immigrants and said that they should all actually get citizenship because we need them in this country to drive truck and work in a factory. So I don't think a Liberal majority is going to be too much different than a Conservative majority. Carney is a bit more bullish on mass immigration. He has, I think his name's Mark Wiseman, funny last name, who is from the Century Initiative, which pushes for Canada's population to be boosted to 100 million by 2100 through immigration alone. He has him working on his campaign. Carney's a big supporter of the Century Initiative and just mass immigration and demographic change in general. But Poilievre himself is a big supporter of that as well. So I don't think a Liberal majority means anything too much different than a Conservative majority, which it was always just going to be a bit more physically restrained continuation of Justin Trudeau's premiership, the same way Mulroney was a bit more physically restrained and neoliberal continuation of Pierre Trudeau's premiership.
That's an interesting take there. And sorry, I had a question here for Wilhelm Apologist. Let me just scroll up here. Where the hell, Salazar fan 270? If WA was born in 2007, the future is very bright. That's not the question. Well, I'm trying to say. So, Ben, what do you think about the results of this election? We're going to be
start getting some rumblings in Western Canada about separatism. I'm from Alberta originally. I don't think it's going to be, and I don't think it's going to gain enough critical mass to go anywhere. But I think that's really the only difference between the Liberals and the Conservatives winning. I agree, it really has nothing to do with anything intrinsic to the parties or their platforms. I think that everybody between Winnipeg and Vancouver, not in those two cities, but everybody between them is going to be grumbling, and the idea of leaving Canada is going to at least pique people's interests for a few months, but then they're going to remember, oh yeah, the whole problem is we couldn't get the pipeline built, and that was an issue because we're landlocked, and we're still going to be landlocked even if we separate. So what's the point? But I think you might get a little bit of, I don't know, I think you might get a bit of rumbling for a very short amount of time, and then I think that energy is going to dissipate.
Speaking of rumbling, Wilhelm, we have a comment here from Ferklick. Do you guys think the patriotism that was spurned by Trump's slight against Canadians can be used in any way, or is it just a nothing burger from hysteric Canadians? If I could just answer quickly, I think that patriotism was utilized by Mark Carney and completely fumbled by Pierre Poilievre, and that's one of the reasons we're at where we're at. But Wilhelm, what do you think about that?
The same demographics that are voting in Canada are more or less voting in the same way that France had an election in 2024. Macron won because all the boomers voted for him. Now, yes, of course, Trump winning caused a patriotic wave among deranged boomers. But if Trudeau, it's kind of difficult to say because, yes, people are voting against Trump. Like people in Canada, like a lot of boomers are saying, or a lot of more patriotic Canadians are saying, we want Carney because he'll fight Trump. Well, even if that were the case, like I still think that it is a lot more demographically, like the liberals, the base of the liberals is more demographically motivated than patriotically motivated, and so this election is more or less being decided by boomers, not patriotism, is what I think. So we can't use it.
That's a good point. I just wanted to follow up with what Token Canadian said when he mentioned Pierre going to those rallies with the Punjabi Sikhs in particular. That was the same rallies where he said direct flights to Amritsar.
Mm-hmm.
We support direct flights to Amritsar. A Canadian is a Canadian. And it was absolutely astounding. It was absolutely astounding. And to touch upon what Wilhelm just said as well, or what that question said, which was, can Canadian patriotism be swung? Absolutely. I think that Canadian patriotism right now is boxed into Pierre Trudeau's left liberalism from the 1960s. This sort of 63 going on 64-year regime that has defined Canada's entire existence for those 6 decades. And anti-Americanism used to mean good things. It used to mean an opposition to liberalism. That's what it was based in. It was based in respect for the crown, for Christianity, for the community, for order, and all of these things. That was the difference between Canada and the States for most of our history. Canada was actually the more conservative nation. If you wanted to get an abortion in Canada, you had to go down south to the United States because they actually legalized abortion first. So can that nascent American-directed patriotism be revived for our purposes? Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, by emphasizing our unique, distinct ethnic differences between ourselves and the United States, because Canadians are distinctly ethnically Canadian. They are Anglo-Canadian and French-Canadian. They're not a hodgepodge of the entire European continent.
Also, one thing I've noticed when checking out coverage from the international media in covering the election, they can't talk about the Canadian election without mentioning Trump. I'm looking at the BBC. I've seen 2 articles where it's like, this election's all about getting firm on Trump. And maybe they're right. But it's strange seeing all these articles about a Canadian election and still just this fucking guy at the same time. There's one question here.
Well, hold on. Can I just add something? Like,
yes.
Of course, this election, the whole Carney campaign was playing on at least the boomers' definition of patriotism. They even brought back the I am Canadian guy. Like, if that's not trying to play off of Canadian quote unquote patriotism, even if we can't define it in a traditional way, it was about vibes. And what was the vibe? It's Mark Carney looks like Peter Mansbridge, and we brought back the I am Canadian guy from beer commercials in the early 2000s. Like, if that's not trying to play on patriotism, then what is?
So I just wanted to call attention.
What I wanted to say.
Oh, sorry. Oh, you continue. Sorry.
Was that it didn't matter how it went. The same demographics would still be voting for Carney. Now, Carney recent events, Trump activated that demographic. Sure, they're playing on patriotism, but how real is that patriotism? And does that patriotism exist among the younger demographic?
I think it's real. It's just superficial. I think it was a vibe. The boomers really did believe it, saying, "Okay, this is like Canada in the '90s." Like the Carney campaign was like watching the CBC in the '90s. So it was. I think it was a real feeling of patriotism. It just was not terribly substantial.
I just want to call attention to one question here from Pragmatic Culture. American here, is Canada's legal immigration worse off than America's? I can just answer that quickly before throwing it to you guys. I actually think it's not as bad as America, because when you break down the legal immigration question, and whatever country you're looking at, there's multiple fronts. Now, in Canada, I know we have a lot of legal immigration through academia and through other, programs like that. But I don't think we have anything comparable to the southern border issue in America, because they have that plus the exact same infiltration through academia and through the H-1B program. So we have like 2 out of 3, but I don't think that southern border problem can be understated.
So if I might just chime in, I would actually disagree with that. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know the exact numbers, so I can't speak to what the exact legal American quota is per year. But in Canada, we have a straight shot immigration of around 400,000, 450,000 per year. We have an estimated 2 million international students and temporary foreign workers in the country. And then we accepted probably something close to another million in refugees, almost all of whom are completely legal. Canada is geographically isolated. We don't have that southern border. We don't share a land border with Mexico. So there's really no, and of course we're surrounded by 2 oceans. We don't have an easy means of illegally entering Canada. Most times people do so through the US border, but that's extremely rare. It's not very common, as most of the immigrants here will try to illegally cross into the United States. But we've received 5.5 million people over the last 4.5 years. So I would say that the problem with immigration in Canada is almost totally legal. It's not illegal, it's legal immigration. Now, those legal immigrants are going to become illegal once their visas expire. And my concern is that Poilievre or Carney are going to give them permanent residency rather than forcing that massive population to go home.
Well, not just that, they'll grant them amnesty. The Conservatives, for a while, when Trudeau came out, because it was released, I think it was 2024, 2023, some group in Canada, which, funny enough, actually advocates for illegal immigrants. Like, the illegal immigrants have their own government lobby organization. They said that there's about anywhere between 40,000 to 800,000 undocumented immigrants in Canada from just the last 10 years alone. And they were saying all of these people risk deportation at any point in their life, and isn't that such a terrible thing? And they were lobbying the government to grant them all amnesty to a number of people that even this lobby group wouldn't say. They said maybe it's 40,000, maybe it's 800,000, maybe it's a bit more than that. And the Liberals came out. Well, first, obviously, the NDP came out and said, we'll grant them amnesty. And the Liberals were coming out and saying that we support this idea and we're going to look into it. And the Conservatives refused to make a stance. Like, I used to work in the Conservative Party on conservative campaigns. I know a lot of Conservative MPs and people that work on their staffs. And the common response I got when I spoke to them was, the party hasn't decided what it thinks yet. They're in the middle about whether or not to grant amnesty. Poilievre wanted to support it, but was worried that he'd take too much of a blow to his base. And you got to remember, in 2023, he was still trying to get rid of the PPC, so he didn't want to give them something like that. So the worry isn't just permanent residency. It's Poilievre or Carney would grant these people citizenship. Like, Poilievre voted to grant permanent residency to the parents and grandparents of anyone who came here as a refugee. Like, that is insane chain migration. Like, that's like insane. So, like, the Conservatives are much more radical on the immigration question than many people realize. Like, they think they're bad, but they don't realize how bad they are.
Well, it's just like, who was it? It may have been Academic Agent or somebody else, but they said, like, Conservatives are true believers, Liberals are just cynical opportunists.
Yeah, true believers in line go up at least.
I do wonder if that is true though, because when I was on that last panel, I went on a big rant for saying that what do the conservatives actually stand for, and I believe that they believe their role in Canadian politics is just to tamp down the excesses of the Liberal Party. And a lot of people have noticed that over the years that they'll recite these mantras that conservatism is liberalism driving the speed limit, or conservatism is liberals from 5 years ago, something like that. And I think that is true. But I think that if you were to ask what conservatives actually believe, if at Polyev, he would say something about taxes. And I think it would just be trying to control the liberal excesses. So there's really nothing to grasp onto with them, and I think they just see that as they're there to check and balance the Liberal Party, but that's why they're never going to energize anyone. And I don't know what it would take. What it would take is a figure like Trump. You don't even need to like Trump to understand that he disrupted Republican politics to such a degree that's never going back to how it was. Like, remember that dais of losers that he was up against that first election, and he was this new thing, and he had to fight them every step of the way to achieve his status. So there is nothing that the Conservative Party could ever do to fix its problem, which just sees itself as trying to survive as the Liberals guide the political dance in this nation, just like it was in America.
Yeah, I feel like I could
answer that. Can I give you an answer? The last Conservative leader who actually truly believed anything to the point that he shaped the character of the party was Stephen Harper, and he believed in free trade at all costs, and he even wrote his master's thesis on that.
If I can interrupt, the last Conservative politician worth a damn was Rob Ford. All right, go ahead.
Okay, all right. I didn't say worth a damn. I said who actually believed anything. I did.
I love that fat crack smoking maniac. I miss him every day.
But before Harper, it was the Reform Party, and I mean they were, the energy behind that party was Preston Manning, and he was a Western regionalist at all costs, and he believed in what the Americans would call libertarianism. I think Fortissax talked about that Gen X libertarianism, that, individualism, uber alles. That, other than Preston Manning and Stephen Harper, can you tell me anybody who has shaped the Canadian right? I don't mean writing policy papers on this or that. I mean somebody who seems to actually shape it with their personality and their true beliefs.
No, Jen, there hasn't been anyone since Diefenbaker, and he was pretty flawed.
Yeah.
Like the common arguments liberals or people on the left generally use against conservatives is that they just fear change, or that they have inherited biases. And while that's like false, like at least for us, like the so-called base right-wingers, that is sort of true for mainstream conservative parties, where a lot of the time
I have prejudices.
For elections, they're playing off the fear. They're playing off the fears of people who actually care about the fate of their country. They're not like to the extent that they campaign. That is their only that is one of their only campaign tactics, to appeal to people who care while they themselves don't care.
I can't remember who said it. Somebody defined the post-war consensus as left-wing means the United States is good and right-wing means Nazis are bad. Like, you're asking, what does the left-wing accuse the right-wing of? The left-wing accuses the right-wing of, you're trying to bring us back to Germany in the late 1930s. I mean, do they have anything that they believe with as much vim and vigor as that?
Well,
to answer a question by Dimes about, like, he was talking about what the conservatives really believe in. As someone that was in the Conservative Party for a pretty long time, as like working on campaigns, as a member, delegate, I can tell you, like, I've met many conservative, like the people that actually run the party, the lifeblood of the party. They don't believe in anything but actually forming government. Like I've said before, one of the things I say a lot is the Conservative Party is the largest refugee camp on earth. a party of people who, for whatever reason, aren't in the Liberals, whether it's the Liberals can't win in their seat or whatnot, and aren't extreme enough to be in the NDP. So they just join the Conservative Party. The only thing the people in the Conservative Party have in common with each other is they all desperately want power and to win, and that's all they care about. And that's why you watch every election they lose, they cannibalize themselves because they have no core ideology to hold on to. If you look at the campaigns they run, Poilievre's whole campaign was based on I'm not Trudeau and the carbon tax is bad. And also I'm going to legalize, like the last minute campaign proposal of the Conservatives was this gimmicky thing about we're going to legalize buying Zyn in stores. And there were some other gimmicky policies of the Conservatives. O'Toole had this thing of we're going to get rid of the GST during Christmas one time for 1 year and then never again. Very gimmicky policies because they lacked any actual cohesive ideology.
We saw the same thing recently with plastic straws, didn't we?
Oh yeah, that's another thing, Polyev. That was the other gimmicky policy that I was thinking about. He's going to unban the plastic straws. That's what I was in this election where our manufacturing, which were sold off by Mulroney, what we have left is now getting ready to be sold off by whoever's next elected prime minister. Demographic change is making our country look like India and China and Africa. And mass immigration is just being untouched, and everything is getting worse. The heartbreaking issue that I was hoping someone would address is the fact that plastic straws are banned. Like, isn't this the most important thing of a generation that Trudeau's gotten away with? He got away with highway robbery. He banned plastic straws, and we didn't put him on trial for treason. How dare we? Like, this is what the Conservatives think are important. At the same time, Poilievre refuses to say the word immigration. He almost never said the word immigration during this whole campaign. Never once tied the immigration crisis to housing, which, as someone as myself that thinks it's stupid to link immigration with economic issues, I think immigration is a national issue and we should attack immigration for that. But even just basic boomer takes of like immigration's making everything more expensive, it's driving down your wages and it's ruining the housing market. He couldn't even do basic things like that. But he can talk about unbanning plastic straws. The party stands for nothing. The people in it are some of the worst people you'll ever meet. I've never met more Freemasons in my life than I've done at Conservative Party meetings and conventions. It's honestly astonishing. And when you talk to them, there were people in the Conservative Party that you'd be surprised, like high up in the Conservative Party, that agree with us on immigration. Like agree with the idea that we not only need to stop immigration completely, but we need repatriation. And I'm like, this is amazing. Let's do something about it. No, if we say anything, we'll get kicked out of the party. It's better to compromise on what we believe and get elected and do some of it than completely stand for what we believe and get thrown out of the party. And that's the mantra of the people in the Conservative Party that agree with us. And the other people in the Conservative Party, it's just, I want to be an MP, maybe a cabinet minister, hopefully prime minister. That's all they care about. The Conservative Party is the party of people who just care about getting elected first, and that's all.
You're telling me that Melissa Lantsman isn't based?
I have met her on multiple occasions. She's actually worse in person. She's the first time I met her and spoke to her, she spoke for 15 minutes unprompted about how she could never be a liberal because the Liberal Party harbors anti-Semitic undertones. Unprompted. I didn't even bring up Israel or anything. She just brought that up on her own. Sorry, this is the woman that will be Deputy Prime Minister of Canada if she's elected, if the Conservatives win government. That's your Deputy Prime Minister.
I have a couple of comments to just point to here. One, there's some chatter that we've sedated Wilhelm or we have him chained up somewhere, preventing him from speaking. Wilhelm, assure your people that you're feeling fine.
I'm not feeling fine. Go on.
There's also a message here for you from Spastic. I only know politics from Hearts of Iron 4 mods. Love you, Wilhelm, by the way.
I only know politics from White 4 mods too. Thank you.
We had another question early on. And actually, I'll call attention to this now. I'll try and make it through some of the super chats we've gotten to make sure I don't miss them. Qwerty says, cool, but how is this America's fault? We were talking about America before. Do we blame America for anything? I've seen some chats here saying that we're sorry, continue.
No, I was just going to say, so you got to understand something. While I logically see probably what Trump's attempt was at bullying Canada economically and threatening our sovereignty, which was to force the elite and the state apparatus to get its ass into gear and start making some decisions that will benefit not only itself, but also the United States of America, and uphold its obligations as a North American trading partner, and uphold its obligations to security in the Arctic. Unfortunately, Trump hit the one Pavlovian trip mine in the lizard brain of the Canadian subconscious, which is, we are not American. And this primordial truth goes back to 1783 during the Loyalist Patriot split, when 100,000 of our ancestors marched north after the American Revolution to found a completely separate country based in principles opposite to that of the American Revolution, based in principles that were older, more conservative. And so if Trump or perhaps his administration knew more about Canada, he'd know that that was not the stick that you want to poke Canadians with. Because while I don't believe that that played the sole role to Carney's rise and the boomers galvanizing in support about Carney, it played a massive role. It played a disproportionate role. I would say probably maybe 2 out of 3 of the reason that the boomers flocked to Carney was specifically that. Is that that's the one thing you don't talk about with Canadians. That's the one thing, and people made memes about it. 5.5 million immigrants or migrants enter your country and screw everything up. I sleep. America threatens annexation. I'm ready to march in the thin red Grenadier line. I am ready to die.
And the thing is, even if we're annexed, the first thing that's going to happen is every Indian and Chinese in this country is going to go to California and Florida, and we still don't want it.
Yeah, and moreover, like the whole tactic of Trump was incredibly stupid and naive. Even if the 51st state remarks were made in jest, he should have known that Canadians just dislike America. I mean, from my own upbringing and from everybody else, that's just like what your friends talk about in school, what your parents like. We have healthcare, we have blah blah blah. Like Canadians just don't want to be part of America. You can maybe massage the issue over time and bring about, say, North American Union through diplomatic efforts, but you could call Trump a naive idealist here. Like the idea that you would threaten Canada by threatening annexation to get them to do stuff, that was like, yeah, that is America's fault. Like you can't put that any other way. If you studied Canada for 5 minutes, you would know this. So in a way, yeah, that is Trump's fault.
I mean, if the goal was to empower Polyev or the PPC, you basically just sunk any chance of doing so.
Yeah, we've got a comment from Yen. Canada doesn't stand a chance without the U.S. geopolitically. We have no 100-year plan besides fill us to the brim with nons. And we were seeing some moves being made to bring Canada towards the European Union and their sphere of influence. At least I think that's one of the plans Mark Carney has. What do you think about that? You think that's what's happening? And do you think that is...
Just look at Ukraine. Any rival geopolitical power that wants to get influence in Canada, that's going to make some people in Washington, D.C. very unhappy. And you just need to look at Ukraine for the evidence of that.
Mm-hmm. First of all, like I think in based world, it would be nice. I think in principle, closer, maybe not actually joining the European Union, but closer ties with Europe as we have had historically may not be a bad idea. Unfortunately, until the regime in Europe is completely destroyed, that's a horrible idea. That's an absolutely horrible, terrific idea.
Well, yeah, and Europe is gay too. Well, Europe is liberal too. This is sort of off topic, but Russia, like a think tank in Russia said, Russia and America need to team up to fight Eurofascism. And Canada, like, if Eurofascism was real, Canada teaming up with Europe would be cool. But this is like France and Spain during the age of absolute monarchies, like fighting it out.
Or it's like World War II.
Catholic. Yeah. Well, France and Spain were Catholic, yet they fought each other. Now, America and Europe are basically the same thing with with some differences, yet they are antagonizing each other. Like, what's the point?
We have one question here. I missed this one earlier from Dirt Smoker 3000. What is the best outcome for Canada's future today? Wilhelm Apologist, all things considered, and we can start with him. And then to the rest of you, same question. What is the ideal outcome?
I could tell you the ideal outcome, but that's like fantasy. Well, like, what
Go
if we
for it.
created a party and then a mass movement started and then we took over? I don't know. I guess the best thing would, like, the best realistic thing that could happen would be if they did actually, what is it in French? Give people the obligation to leave, like deport all the millions of temporary workers and students. That is the best thing in the near future that is actually realizable. Aside from that, I know I can't tell the future. I can't tell you what else would be realistically possible. That's all I can say.
What
And
about everyone else? What
anybody
would be
else?
the perfect outcome?
That's a big question.
Because I had one comment that was, again, on the last live stream I was at. The consensus for the people I was talking to would be a complete collapse of the Conservative Party. Just a total, utter defeat, Carnegie-Geddon whole thing, forcing them to either rebuild it from the ground up or something else happens.
I'm not a big believer in a ballot box solution, but just realistically looking at it from like an electorally strategical standpoint, the greatest obstacle to a real revolutionary nationalist party taking hold in any Western country is the lack of a strong or dominant or organized center-right party. The main reason why you won't see parties like AFD or actual nationalist parties in Europe take over, because you will always have the CDU there, which will come in and say, well, we'll kind of do all the things the AFD does, but the media isn't going to attack us as much, so they're not going to make you as scared of us, and you can feel a bit more comfortable voting for us. And so center-right parties like the Conservatives are the reason why we don't have a nationalist party in Canada. If the Conservatives didn't exist or the Conservatives got wiped out, it's not about whether the Conservatives they'll look at their election defeat and be like, we really need a change. The Conservatives won't do that. I know the people in the Conservative Party. I've been in the Conservative Party. You can, even without being in it, you can look at the history. Every election defeat, the Conservatives either stay the course or they move more to the left. They never move to the right. They never become better. The Conservative Party, center-right parties, establishmentarian parties, on the right, quotations, should be demolished. Our biggest enemy, if you want a ballot box solution as a nationalist party, you need to get rid of the center-right establishment party first. They are the biggest obstacle to getting power. Think of it this way. If your only choices were between someone saying, we are going to save you from economic disenfranchisement and collapse and all the working class jobs and all the real jobs leaving this country and mass replacement, or a party like in Ontario where I live, where the NDP were promising that the government-funded transgender surgeries for minors, whereas Doug Ford was promising to bring back factories that have been gone since the 80s, people overwhelmingly voted for the Conservatives in that election over the NDP, who were the opposition. So if the choice is in Germany, if the CDU wasn't in the picture, and it was between the AFD saying there are too many people coming in, look, there have been 3 terrorist attacks in this election, and the SPD, who are saying, we can't close the border even though there's terrorist attacks, what will the EU think of us? Which message do you think is more appealing to the average person? You didn't have the CDU there in the middle going, well, we're going to close the border, but we're not going to be too extreme, just vote for us, guys. The Conservatives, the best case realistic scenario is Carney getting over 200 seats, the Conservatives getting pummeled and just dying off as a party. I don't think that will happen, but that's the best case scenario for nationalists if you want a ballot box solution.
Just blood-based here with a very nice super chat. Better to be American than nothing at all. Sounds
What's
like
an American?
Well, that's what some people are also saying in the chat.
What's
too.
that?
Yeah. What is that? What is that?
Do
a melting
you-
pot?
Ah.
I love this. No, I've heard this a lot, though. Americans do this where they're like, well, you guys, what about America? Americans are the real right-wing country. I'd rather be an American. We still have a chance. It's like you guys never had a chance. You were never a nation. America is the only country on earth that was founded without a national identity, but a founding ethnicity. It was founded on the idea of liberalism. America is founded on liberalism. Like people are like, "Oh, well, you're drowning. You can't save yourself." It's like America never had a boat. There was never a boat for America. America was founded on individualism, liberalism, and no nation. Anyone that believes in freedom anywhere can be an American. So better to be an American than nothing at all.
American is an anachronism. Until after the Civil War, Americans very much
Yes.
saw themselves as Anglo-Saxons.
Yes, that's 100% true. The truth is both of those things. I was just gonna say to throw a bone to the Yankees. At the very least, for their first 100 years, they did have a very strong sense of Anglo-Saxon identity. They were very deeply British rooted. If you look at the painting of the founding fathers signing the Declaration of Independence, the flag of England is actually in the background hanging on the wall. Hengist and Horsa were almost on either their currency or some other document. I don't remember which one it was, but they very much saw themselves as Anglo. And all of that started to change with the 1860s, with the American Civil War. The federal government flooded the country with European immigrants from across the four corners of the continent. And Calvin Coolidge's Immigration Act of 1924, which was pressured by the Second Klan, who successfully got it into office, permanently capped immigration to Northwestern Europeans for like a 40-year period until 1965 when it was repealed. But as I've written before and as I've argued, that was kind of the linchpin for the American project. White Americans do not have a cohesive ethnic identity, which is why they fall back on racial identity, because that's really all they have. That's the only unifying variable when it comes to race or ethnicity, when it comes to identity that they have. And so Canada doesn't have that. Canada is ethnically homogenous in its Anglo and Franco components, very much like Europe in that sense.
I saw a question in chat. He asked, would you hate America if it weren't a democracy? And this is important because America's founding is as explicitly a democracy against monarchy, against what they call tyranny. In a way, that is America's identity. And so, importantly, democracy does not only mean voting; it means representation of what is called the will of the people. First, I don't know too much about the Napoleonic era, but what I do know is that Napoleon supposedly represented the will of the French people. And you can even look at some dictatorial countries today, like Russia. Putin claims to represent the will of the Russian people. Now, if America became like a Christian theocracy, like sure, whatever, it would become better. But what I fear will happen is a dictator will rise in America, but nothing will really change because it will still have this mythological foundation based on a civic identity rather than an ethnic one.
That's right.
Not to sidetrack things too much, but the American, identity, the democracy in the American identity does not come from their founding. It comes from Andrew Jackson. It comes from 50 years after their founding. And not that I really want to sidetrack a Canadian election stream into that, but I mean the idea that democracy is in the American blood right to the root is I don't know if I completely agree with that. I think they could be convinced to do a lot of things with the right leader, just as any of us could.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
That said, again, to mediate on the Yankee question as well, like obviously their early republic wasn't the way it was today. They had some pretty significant checks and balances. They had a republican aristocracy modeled off of Rome. It's not like we had, they had universal mass democracy and it was a total shit show like it is today. So it's looking like Nova Scotia is halfway to going full red.
Would we say that's an upset?
Awesome.
Was that on the board for an
It's
easy
very
win?
early days. There's most of these seats have 1 or 2 polls reporting. It's hard to say which is going anything. I think the major story would be from Newfoundland, where there's actually a significant number of polls coming in. The Conservatives are overperforming, which seems to be attributed to the lobster fishery dispute between the white Newfoundlander fishers and the natives. They were overfishing in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, sorry, like they were in Nova Scotia in 2021, fishing during breeding periods, which technically they're allowed to do because of constitutional special privileges given to the natives, which usually pisses off the white fishers wherever they do it in Atlantic Canada. And in response, those fishers usually vote Conservative out of anger. They did it in Nova Scotia. The reason why the Conservatives gained 2 seats, specifically 1 seat in Nova Scotia in 2021 when they weren't expected to, was there was a similar fisher dispute there. That seems to be what's happening in Newfoundland. It looks like the Conservatives might beat the polls there. But besides that, everything else is like 4 or 5 polls reporting. It's too early to make any prediction on that.
Now, to go back to the esoteric shit slinging for a second, I got a comment here from Rumble, and it's about how can Canada have unique national identity as part of the Commonwealth? And that triggered something in my mind by thinking that I'm hearing multiple conversations right now about the future of Canada. It's either thriving in the American sphere of influence, or thriving within the European sphere of influence, or thriving as some sort of other Commonwealth, the CanZuck. There seems to be multiple proposals. None of them seem to involve Canada achieving any sort of sovereignty. I'm wondering what those gathered here think of that. Is there any future for Canada, or are we just destined to be something like Ukraine?
Most peoples and countries in history have been a vassal of somebody or other. I mean, sometimes it's just been the Catholic Church, but like the idea of a country truly being independent is the country has to be quite powerful before that's even an option. It's realistically, we are going to be in a suzerain relationship with somebody, but that's the way most societies have been, so I don't see why we're afraid of that.
Serbia, I know a lot about Serbia, was pretty closely attached to Russia before World War One, but they had a lot of autonomy. Like the reason World War One got out of hand is because Russia supported Serbia. Like you can have countries that are dependent on a great power to exist, but that doesn't mean that you sacrifice your sovereignty. You can still have autonomy. Now, Canada is a nation of maybe 27 million British and French.
You can still have autonomy within a suzerain relationship, though.
Yeah. So if Canada became the client of Britain again, we would have a lot more autonomy compared to if we were the client of the U.S.
We got Jordan here saying, fuck CanZuck, like I want more left-wing bongs and Australians in this place. A good question. Would you swap out the Indians for Australians?
Look, again, the CanZuck thing, I feel like the ship has sailed on that. That was something that the Canadian government and the Commonwealth countries, the 4 principal Commonwealth countries, should have done much earlier. The first rendition of it was supposed to be the Imperial Federation in the early 1900s. The World Wars basically killed off any support for it. It was a nice idea for a globe-spanning super federation with I think it was a rotating parliament from London to each of the capitals, like every few whatever years, or maybe it was just London, I'm not sure. But it was supposed to be a super federal union with a lot of autonomy for the economic and military interests of the 4 CanZuck members. Unfortunately, it looks like the United States has copied the idea with the US-AUK agreement, at least militarily, where they have definitely tightened their grip on their Australian vassal for more security in the Pacific Ocean. As well as providing them nuclear submarines, which they pissed off the French in order to obtain, because they originally were going to order them from France, and they said, go F yourself. and it didn't work out. So yeah, the Americans basically took Kanzuk long after any chance of it existed to pass. And yeah, so and not to mention the fact like the UK is insanely leftist, just like Australia and New Zealand are. So it wouldn't, it's not a good idea as it currently stands. In principle, is that the ideal? Sure. Second pick, Euro integration. Third pick, United States.
But Kanzuk isn't even like a real proposition. Like that isn't going to happen anytime soon. Like I don't know, I don't I don't pay attention to the news, but Kanzuk isn't like that isn't going to form anytime soon. Am I right?
Well, not just that. The fact that the moment it starts seriously being considered, India and the Indian government start hysterically screaming about why they aren't involved in a free trade, free movement organization, which means that if Kanzuk does come in, not only I don't understand why Canada will want to be in a mass free trade organization with free movement, but the fact that, like all things, Kanzuk will probably liberalize and allow India to join, which means we'll be in a free trade, free movement organization with India. I think it just makes the idea of Kanzuk, I've always thought it was this ridiculous idea that makes no sense. If we're going to be Canadian nationalists, why do we want to be in a free trade organization and a free movement organization with anyone, let alone, Australia and New Zealand that have almost as bad immigration, if not worse immigration policies than us, and the United Kingdom, which I think has an even worse immigration policy than us. Why would we want free movement to these people? Kanzuk isn't going to be, it's only free movement for the Anglos in these countries. None of the I almost used the term I shouldn't have used. Some of the other people that aren't native to the land, in the land, moving, like all the Pakistanis and Indians and Africans.
Well, that's why I said based
let in will be allowed to just walk right into Canada.
Wilhelm, what do you got to say about all this? I know people are thinking that I'm keeping you down.
I mean, I don't have a lot to say here. If Kanzuk were done by esoteric reactionists, then it would be fun. But if it's going to be done by liberals, then it will be a liberal project. And like what happened with Brexit, the UK government turned Brexit from a conservative thing to a mechanism to bring in more immigrants. The same could be true of Kanzuk, where you think, wow, we're reconnecting with our past, our glorious ancient past, but actually it's a way to funnel more economic migrants into Anglo countries, more or less. So I don't think there's any hope there.
All right. Just checking on the chat here. Now, what do you think about this? I know you find this interesting for a second. The shield and the red ensign covers the main ethnic Canadians, French and British Empire. Other whites have come just before the Great War and since. Do you think there's a future in Canada in signaling to the old stock Canadians, the Anglo and the Franco originators of the country, as Mark Carney seemed to do not long after he showed up on the scene here?
Well, there has to be. And there's, in my view, if any nationalist project is to take off in Canada, it's going to have to answer the white ethnic question. And so by pure demographics alone, there's going to have to be an alliance between those two groups, which I think is a logical conclusion. I also think that it's going to be easier than some people think. There are certainly differences, and unlike the United States, we did not have an assimilating pot. We did not attempt to integrate all of these European diaspora. Canada has not had an assimilation policy for 50 years. So for the entire lifetime that boomers have been alive, since the 1971 immigration policy, every single immigrant who's come here and has assimilated has done so voluntarily, which is why we have a massive number of little Italys, little Greeces, little Chinatowns, why we have Brampton, why we have Surrey, and so on and so forth. And these groups are just not assimilating. They're not in favor of assimilating. They don't respect the British and French heritage of Canada. But as a matter of fact, the demographic turning point in the city of Toronto, ethnic Canadians are only 29% of the whole city. We're reaching the point where white foreigners are almost more in number than ethnic Canadians, and in Toronto that would be Anglo Canadians. So, in my view, as long as there is a respect and recognizance and a willingness to participate in the national project, a respect and recognizance to the British and French heritage, and into assimilating and to integrating with that, I think that that's a no-brainer. Important to note, I'll finish on this too. It's important to note that the Anglos and the French are still the clear majority. In fact, they're the overwhelming majority of all whites in Canada.
I want to call attention to this, and it's not an endorsement of it, but he paid real Canadian dollars for this. The only real option is becoming a NASBOL regime, National Bolshevism Party of Canada. I mean, let's throw that to the boys here. Do we think National Bolshevism is a tenable position in the Great White North?
I get accused of being a national Bolshevik quite frequently because I believe in the basics of Canadian economics, or at least the founding Canadian economics of crown corporations, government intervention, not unregulated American style capitalism, which is just everyone fends for themselves like individualistic dogs fighting over scraps. And but then at the same time, I'm like, well, ethnicity and race and nationhood are real things and they exist and they should be preserved. And like, wait, you don't want poor people to die and you don't like immigration? Well, you must be a NASBOL. And it's like, well, that's very interesting. It says a lot about your mental capacities. But no, I don't think
I was accused of being a communist when I went by the moniker of Red Tory, like in the original definition for a while.
I was called a communist because I told Pierre Poilievre's supporter at the Conservative Party convention that campaigning on abolishing government housing was a retarded idea that didn't make any sense and we shouldn't do that. And he said, well, you're just a communist. That's why you don't support abolishing government housing. So this is where their brains stop. Their brain stops at a free market isn't unrestricted. Is this communism? It's like
communism is when government do thing.
Yeah,
it's funny. The NASBOL used to be something
to be degenerate. It's communism.
NASBOL used to be something everyone on the right would accuse each other of being, and I thought it was just a meme until I started meeting real NASBOLs. Some of my best friends are NASBOLs. Yeah, my buddy Zoltanis would be one, and he's been involved in a couple of parties. That's that red-brown alliance stuff. You might even call Haas, like his MAGA communism thing. Maybe that's kind of it too. So it's hard to tell how serious it is, but man, there's quite a few of them.
I have something important to say, which is that socialism is when the government does stuff. And the more stuff it does, the more socialism it is. And if it does a real lot of stuff, it's communism.
And if you're communist enough, then you become Hitler. We all become Hitler.
You become.
I mean, I know we're joking here, but I've made this point a number of times. These words, socialism and communism, are from the 1830s and 1840s. I mean, can we just find some new abstract nouns to use in the year 2025, as opposed to finding 200-year-old abstract nouns and trying to massage the definitions into the modern world? That's just the way I look at things.
I just want to call attention to this. It's by UF 5000. NASBOL is just monarchism without God. I've never heard it described as that, but I'm going to file that one in.
It's just tyranny.
Yeah, it's just tyranny. It's like my understanding of NASBOL is basically it's like Stalinism. It's just totalitarian social nationalism. It's not national socialism. It's social nationalism. Stalin, departed from traditional communism in many ways in order to have a functioning country. He didn't want to spread the revolution worldwide like Trotsky did. It's just like Stalinism. It's just neo-Stalinism.
To me, it's just communism with swastikas. Like, once I break down their points and what they advocate for, and you can say, oh, they believe in race, but they also believe in a multiracial thing. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's actually closer to what I believe. If you've read Marx's early work, it's probably something closer to what Marx would have actually advocated for, but it's not like a unity of these two opposites. It's just communism with some new aesthetics. At least that's my view.
Well, there's no alliance with these people. There's no alliance with communists. These people are cultural Marxists. These people don't, like you said, they believe in a multiracial working class. They may, NASBOLs may play into a bit more a bit about nationality and race than the full-on communists will. But these people are not our friends. They're part of the problem. Their ideology inevitably leads down the same road as cultural Marxism. It might take a bit longer. It may not go directly there, but it will lead to the same outcome. The same way as like a liberal in the 1860s is still a liberal that supports individualism and progressivism, and it will eventually lead to the liberalism we have now. It may not be as bad at the time as the one we have now, but it eventually leads to the same conclusion. Nazbols are not, communists are not. Like this brown-red alliance is the most like unimaginably stupid thing I could ever think about. Like,
So
why do
We are
we
giving National Bolshevism more attention than it deserves.
Yes, yeah.
Let's talk about how I think 9 out of 10 conservative candidates in Ottawa are in mixed race marriages. Did you know that?
Yes.
Speak about
Including
that. Speak about
how many people in our
Paula's
sphere are
wife-
in mixed race marriages?
Paula's
Listen,
wife is
never
from
ask a white
Venezuela.
supremacist. Never ask a white supremacist to race his girlfriend. Okay.
I'm trying to see. There was a great comment here by Stacy Shepard. I'm just trying to find it right now, but it was summarizing the conservative liberal dichotomy. It was, are we getting Indians or Indians faster? That seems to be because to me, like this is what I was saying before. When you see all these conservatives getting angry at the PPC for splitting the vote, and I'm just telling them there's no fundamental difference between either of these parties if you really break it down. One
Your
just
party
signals
has more race mixing, so I don't care.
So we have an interesting comment here that I do want to highlight because I think that it's pertinent and relevant. This is, of course, assuming worst case scenario, Confederation comes to an end, Alberta and Quebec tear it apart. DMC TZ TV says, what if Anglos join the Quebec separatist movement, but it includes all of Canada so that Canada becomes Quebec? Well, I can't speak to the second half of that statement, but what I can say is we're already seeing the PQ, the Separatist Party, the Parti Québécois, trying to appeal to the remnant Anglo-Québécois in that province. They're already trying to appeal to them and reaching out. The new generation of the Parti Québécois are actually all fully fluent in English. They speak extremely good English. The leader's a young guy. He's in his mid-30s. He studied at Oxford as well as, I think, Harvard. And they want to end immigration and replace them all with robotics and AI, which is fascinating. It's probably one of the most radical immigration policies on this North American continent. And for the first time in my life, and indeed perhaps for the first time in Quebec's history, the separatist movement is actually trying to reach out to Anglo-Quebecois whose families have been there for 300 years. So, if Canada breaks apart, I can see a scenario where the Anglos of that province side with Quebec and regional Ontarians also side with Quebec and flock to Montreal, almost like as refugees, and the two of them kind of preserve what's left of actual Canada.
We have one question here from Pragmatic Culture as well. Unrelated, but can we get the panel's opinion on the AFD over in Germany? Seems like they have a good people, but they get cucked by leadership and finance. And I discussed this on the last live stream I was on. I had said that I wished that the PPC could become something like the AFD, where we have issues with the leadership and all the drama surrounding that, but they seem to have a very impressive machine behind them. Like what the AFD isn't just the leaders. It's this affiliation network. It's patronage networks. It's communities that they set up. It's this whole other iceberg beneath the surface. Whereas when I look at the PPC, I just see Bernier, who people like, but there's nothing else really in orbit around him. So to the rest of you, what do you think of the AFD?
They at least have a good song to rally around.
Yeah, I mean, they've managed to pull off what certainly other populist parties have not been able to. And I think the PPC's failure is that perhaps it was maybe too populist. It got extremely popular through the convoy. It had massive popular support from people across the ideological spectrum as this kind of Gen X libertarian-esque party. And that fizzled out. And the reason is, well, I mean, it goes back to the populist delusion. It goes back to, you need some elite backing. You need some institutions, some professionals, some white collar guys to run things. And if you don't have that, you're probably not going to get anywhere. And the PPC has internal competency issues, whereas the AFD Overwhelmingly, they're all East German. They have a long history. They're well organized, and they're not purely populist, not entirely. Maybe in their rhetoric, but they do have some institutions that are left over from their days when they were a sovereign or at least partially sovereign entity.
Okay,
sorry.
but also, the leader of the AFD is a lesbian who's married to a Sri Lankan from Switzerland. I don't think you can have, sure, they might have good rhetoric and in theory good policies. Will they carry that out? I don't know. I don't know when their leader is Alice Vital. So that's what I think. We will see when they're in power.
Communists.
Pardon?
Alice Vital also said she doesn't support the Nazis because they're communists.
Okay.
Just a comment to enrage everybody.
That was a very recent thing. That said, worst case scenario, they could very well be, a step in the right direction, but obviously not the not the end of the means to itself.
So I saw a very interesting comment here, and it was, see if I can find it. Guess each speaker's location by their accent.
No, don't. No doxing.
I don't have an accent, I don't think.
None of us have an accent.
No, we're speaking normally. Everybody else has an accent.
We also have, Cordy, do the Irish count as white wives?
No.
Hey, I'm just reading them because there's money attached.
Listen.
No, I was answering the question. I wasn't saying. I was just answering the question.
Thomas Darcy McGee, our father of Confederation, God bless his sacrifice, God bless his name, died so that the Irish could come here and partake in Confederation. And he was actually assassinated by an Irish Republican because he was pro-British, he was pro-monarchy, and the vast majority of the Irish to Canada were actually pro-British, as opposed to the Irish who went to the States who were anti-British, and yet for some reason still feuded with the Anglo-Americans. Very weird situation. You'd think they would have gotten along, but no.
It's almost like they just don't get along anywhere they go. But I think we should look at the legacy of our one Irish Canadian Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney.
Oh yes, good point.
That should tell you all you
Smoker
need
in
to know about
chat.
the Irish in Canada.
Dirt Smoker 3000. I do not sound like Jordan Peterson. Absolutely freaking not, if you know what I mean. Like, no.
Well, we're watching the election and there's psychopaths on the internet. I honestly, Dimes, you do a better impression than I do.
No matter what, evil clowns win.
Just to get back a bit on the Canadian election.
My daughter's gonna eat your penis.
Because we are such a serious country, Elections Canada's website is down.
So I've got the
They're
Toronto Star one in the I've got the Toronto Star link in the private chat.
The Conservatives have officially flipped a seat, by the way, in Newfoundland.
Yeah. I'm looking at that now. It's looking like Newfoundland. Yeah. Of course, Avalon is still pure red.
Yeah, Avalon re-elected a Liberal. It's okay. The Conservative candidate in Avalon, Steve Kent, was just awful. He endorsed Kelly Leach. I don't know how many people know who Kelly Leach was in 2017. She ran for the Conservative leadership race. Halfway through the leadership race, she said she supported making immigrants take a Canadian values test. And Steve Kent, who is now the Conservative candidate in Avalon that lost, revoked his endorsement of her because he said that is Trump-style politics and we don't need that in Canada.
Incredible.
So apparently wanting immigrants to just share basic values, which I even think is a very weak, like milquetoast idea, was too much for Steve Kent to stomach. So good riddance. Thank God he lost. We don't need people like that in Parliament.
Hey, Seabass asks, will Alberta actually secede if Liberals win the election? What do you all think?
No.
I think there's
I think there's
a real.
Enough, sorry, go ahead.
No, please. I mean, you're the resident Burton.
We just agree not to fucking dodge.
Yeah, there's a general dislike of Ottawa, but the Alberta, in any sort of Alberta independence movements, is always like 20 boomers and a couple of autistic kids. Like, sure, it may enter the conversation a little bit more, but I don't know. I don't have data here, but I just have a hard time seeing it coalesce into something. Who's going to be the leader of it? Like, any movement has to have some sort of a structure, or else it's going to fizzle within a few months. Sure, you might get some righteous anger for a little bit, but what's it honestly going to coalesce into that's going to last more than 6 months? I don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and even if they do get elected at the provincial level and have a referendum, you're going to need more than 50% of people in Alberta to support independence. And even if in if in Quebec that didn't happen, that's absolutely not going to happen in Alberta where they're Anglo.
Yeah.
No,
Well-
definitely. I was gonna say like, so I mean, I'm not an expert on Western Canada, and I certainly accept the expert panelists here on that subject. What I would say is, I think that I don't know. I think maybe that it's unlikely, but that there is potentially an avenue, given how badly the West has been gypped for the last 10 years, especially. Like, yes, they have grievances going back to the 1960s. Yes, reform took over the Conservative Party. Yes, Preston Manning's influence permanently changed Canadian conservatism in the mainstream, the center right. I do think that there is a genuine possibility, due to all the polarization, due to the existence of social media, due to pressure from the United States to destabilize Canada and get the concessions that it wants out of the country, and possibly to play against Carney. I think there's a real possibility maybe that there will be a groundswell that could very well last. I would say the problem with Albertan independence and the problem with independence of Western Canada in general is that it's not a nation. Almost all of Western Canada's grievances with the federal government is economic. They don't frame anything in national or ethnic terms, and indeed they don't have an ethnic identity, because they're, Alberta and Saskatchewan were founded in 1905. They have a long history of economic migration. People go and come back from the Western provinces for job opportunities, not including the massive number of Midwestern Americans who moved there in the late 1890s to the early 1900s, although they're Canadian now, mostly. But hey, we gotta. This is a at least Western friendly chat. We don't have to be pro-Western, but we have to be friendly Western. So yeah, I don't know. I
agree with what you. Sorry, I was just going to say I agree with what you said there, but anything can coalesce around a cult of the personality, and there most definitely was an Albertan cult of personality around Peter Lougheed, who was the premier of Alberta between 1970 and 1985. He was the guy who decided to make Alberta about oil and gas uber alles. Mm-hmm. And overnight, Alberta went from being a social credit party to being a social credit province to being a province where everybody was preaching the gospel of free trade. So, like human psychology is what it is. Alberta became a cult of the personality around one premier, and it could happen again if there's one leader. But like it took literally transforming the economy of the province, and he was the quarterback of doing this because he spent his young life in the States, and he said, we're going to turn the Alberta economy into something modeled after the state of Oklahoma. What is going to happen in Alberta now? How is it going to coalesce around anything, even if there is a groundswell of anger, or people are pissed off about getting shafted by Toronto and Montreal yet again? I just don't see anything that's going to have staying power the way that a centralized leader did in the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So what you're saying is that if there's an Albertan Hitler, then they might secede.
Oh no, that was
listen. I'm telling you, Marty up north. Who knows? Maybe the president of Alberta will be Marty up north. Martin Bélanger, as his real name is.
Old Hitler, as we like to call him around here. I just wanted to point to Ekimo96, he brings something to the table here that can be relevant to the Alberta discussion. He says Newfoundland is retarded, trust me, 80% under 25 white population, but also the least opposed to mass migration at 39%, since they haven't experienced diversity. And that's an interesting data point because from the stats, you'd see that the younger generation is trending conservative. However, I guess there's a counterexample here, and people are talking about once the boomers shuffle off this mortal coil, how will that change politics? But it's not obvious to me that all the youth is radicalized towards the right, as we like to believe. What do you all think about that?
Newfies were the original diversity that we brought into this country.
I don't know. I mean, right now, Gen Z and probably Gen Alpha are trending to the right. And I think that's nominally true. I would say maybe it's 50-50 on their generation. There's still no shortage of SSRI stare libtards with pink hair consuming TikTok slop on a daily basis. So will that change in the future? Who knows? Maybe in the next 10 years, most of Gen Z will be further right. I think that that's how it's going to go. What we do know objectively 100% is that the boomers are totally mind screwed. They're totally, hyper left liberal, tripling down on Pierre Trudeau's vision of Canada. And this is sort of their last grasp. This is, where they are. A not insignificant number of 18 to 35-year-olds are supporting conservative, and they're swinging right globally. It's not just in Canada, it's also in the States, it's in Europe, it's in Oceania. So I think you will continue to see Gen Z, especially as their prospects socioeconomically decline everywhere, are going to swing to the hard right.
Well, it's interesting. There's a comment here. Gen Z are siding with the right, but anime PFPs will never win a culture war. I think that's interesting because how many young people are content creators, right? If you just go on X and listen to what Zoomers, and I don't know if Gen Alpha are out there yet, but to see what they're saying, maybe they trend to the right, but the vocal ones seem to be the most, let's say, schizo about it. So there seems to be a demarcation there with younger generations, the mass of them, and then their representatives, which might be decoupling in the future as they're becoming even more radicalized. So maybe it's not the best indicator to take the temperature of what Zoomer creators say versus Zoomers themselves.
That's a good point.
If you're a content creator on X, if that's your main platform, I don't think you really count as a content creator. Secondly, enemy PFPs
I agree with
this. They're schizo, and they won't win a culture war. That's totally true. The reason why, I mean, I'm not Sigmund Freud, so I don't like to do psychologizing. But if you choose to portray yourself as a teenage girl, that isn't. I think that says something about you psychologically. You wouldn't be fit to lead a political movement.
So there was this old tweet that was something like it was some trans person or whatever talking about their experience, and they were like, "Oh, why do you play as a girl in RPGs? Is that because you want to be one?" And they're like, it was something like everybody who played a girl in an RPG ended up trans. And I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense actually. And I think I know that anecdotally.
It's weird because I'm a fucking cold, true old head. You know what I mean? So like I see young guys playing as women and they're doing it ironically. To me, that means you're gay or trans. But I think to young guys, it's just, I don't know, it's fun. I feel old when I talk to somebody. I have to keep them in my orbit just to keep me relevant. And they're talking to me like I'm chud coded. I had a right wing Zoomer call me chud coded the other day, and I felt really old. I'm like, what do you mean? What is that good? Like just fucking fumbling for my rotary fucking dial phone here.
To be fair, I also know, I don't know. I also don't know if that's a good or bad thing either. But
I think chud coded just means you're a millennial and you still like South Park and early Simpsons humor. You never, like in 2017, decided to get offended over everything. I don't know. That's how I feel that Zoomers look at us.
Speaking of chuds, somebody in the comments mentioned Pierre Poilievre looks like a rat. No, the reason Pierre Poilievre fails with women is because he looks like Chud Jack. That's
He
why.
does.
He looks
Yeah,
identical to
He-
Chud Jack.
He got too excited eating that apple. He saw
Nothing ever happens.
he started thinking he was cool. That's the problem. The worst thing Pierre Poilievre started doing was speaking with his chest, a bit too confidently. That's not you. You're not built like that. You got to be more scheming. You got to be more despicable. I think you can get the female boat by being hyper despicable, but you're not going to get there by acting like a guy who lifts and you don't lift. You don't got the shoulders to eat an apple like that, and he should have known better. Someone should have been in his ear saying, "You're more of a pear guy. You don't got the fucking chest to start eating apples." It was just misfire after misfire.
Was that more or less gay coded than playing the girl character?
Good question.
Oh, yeah,
Dude,
there we
how
go.
much has this guy aged over the last 2 years? He looks
There's no
like
way
he
that's
aged
him. There's no
5
way.
to 10, 5 to 10 years, man. He looks like he's fucking 50 years old.
Yeah, look at those jowls.
Yeah, homie looks like Nixon.
Dude, he aged into being a Japanese man. He's got a real,
man.
like, aged Japanese. He's got a.
Maybe
East Asian-
Shinzo Abe faked his death.
He kind of looks like Hitler when he started taking meth.
Oof. Big oof.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna pass.
Damn, it's still looking like Newfoundland is still leaning red. Newfoundland Labrador.
Just my results from here we go. Yep. Well, I mean, we're only at 2% reporting. And by the way, we had Token Canadian. He had to leave, I believe, either for another stream or he just had a bucket of chicken to eat. I don't know. He said he might very well be back later. But
And we're +1 now. My co-host just showed up.
Hey guys, I just want to say Newfoundland, they managed to dwarf the codfish. When Europeans showed up, the average codfish was 6 feet long, and now it's 3 feet long, thanks to the Newfoundlanders.
we got a real
Pride
PPP
on
surfer dynamic going on here. No one's fine. Just leave me hanging there. That's okay. That's okay.
Sorry, I'm looking at. I was looking at the comment you just posted. Yeah, I mean, Poilievre. Sorry, what was it? You said something about Poilievre. Is it over for Poilievre if he loses? 110%. They're going to toss him.
Well, here's a
110%.
comment from Red Green Nationalism. Who would replace Pierre if he loses? Mel Lastman, Doug Ford. Who? Like, that's a good question.
I have no idea. It's probably going to be somebody even less charismatic than Poilievre is, which is not saying much. And they're probably going to be even more moderate because the CPC's funders have no idea what they're doing. They've got absolutely no idea. They're not in touch with their base. They're going to say that, well, Pierre Poilievre was too Trumpian. And
here's the thing: no matter what people think about Trump, I'm not a Trump guy by any stretch of the imagination. But if you look at what he did to the Republican Party, they didn't choose him. He hijacked the party. You cannot rely on this party to forward anyone that exciting. I think the last one would have been Obama, but how he got there is a lot more dark and murky. But really, for the future of the CPC, it is a party that must be hijacked. Some dark horse candidate has to emerge, elbow his fucking way through, and take control of it. But if it's up to them to choose a replacement, as you were saying, the lesson they learned may very well be that Poilievre was too extreme. Poilievre didn't appeal to the non-whites enough, or they'll say, you know what, maybe we admit defeat to the Liberals and just move left even more just to survive. That could be where they go.
I think the silver lining out of that could very well be that you'll see something emerge out of the PPC or an alternatively nationalistic party.
That's traditionally done is split the conservative vote, and that's how we ended up with Chrétien and the kind of liberal hegemony that we saw before Harper. That's the issue with that strategy. Honest to God, guys, you're probably going to see Doug Ford as the next conservative prime minister. I don't like saying that. I haven't liked Doug since he was a running freaking cover for his brother as a city councillor in Toronto. But that's the guy who's going to do it. That's the guy with the national profile.
What, Buck a Beer's not going to be a good conservative leader?
Sorry?
I said, what? Buck a beer is not going to be a good conservative leader.
He's again, if you're talking about moderation, he's going to go where the polls lead him. I think he's proved that at this point. So if you're looking for somebody who's going to ideologically get the country back in shape, Doug's probably not your guy. But you're probably going to see Doug before you see, whatever.
I mean, there's a couple names in the chat here. Jordan says Black Woman Time, Leslie Lewis.
Yes, yeah. Actually, I predicted this too. I was like, yeah, what if they just throw in Leslie Lewis so that they can beat the Liberals at having the first Black woman Prime Minister of Canada?
Oh, that's something they would do. That's 100% what they would do.
110%. Now, they'd muzzle her on the topic of abortion, which she's a hardliner on. But
Doug Ford is
really
just,
at
he's
this
just
point,
a mafia guy. Like,
sorry.
all Doug Ford cares about is building condos to house more immigrants to enrich his friends. So yeah. He's just going to follow the polls. That's it.
Well, Doug, there's a famous picture of him with a Sikh biker gang, and he passed a law allowing them to not wear helmets on the road. Like, if you can Google that and find it, like that, he'll go wherever. In Toronto, the Ford brothers went wherever they could gain advantage, and that included buddying up to the Dixon Street Bloods, who are the scum of scum. These are people, scumbags look down on the Dixon Street Bloods as saying these people are scumbags, and that they were, partying with them. So, and doing God knows what else with them. So, you're not, if you're looking for people of integrity, you're not going to find it in the Fords. That's just my read on it. As somebody who's watched them for many years at this point.
Nodak88 says Ted Cruz is Canadian. Vote him. You know what? I'm a cruise missile now.
And sorry, just for the people who are listening to this audio, we have a paid chat here. Doug Floyd, I can't beer. I saw that bit being workshopped in real time, and it's something special. We got Star Saber saying Canadian politics will evolve into a copy of British politics. What do you think about that? I need some more clarity on what they mean specifically by that, but yeah.
I know what they're talking about.
Canada's going to become more left wing, or like the Conservatives will betray their voters. Well, first of all, the Conservative Party has to get elected to betray their voters. Secondly, like the Liberals they're technically like the centrist party if you consider the Conservative center right and the NDP center left. Like I know that's not true, but that's how like especially boomers see the Liberal Party as the reasonable adults in the room. So in order for it to become a copy of British politics, the Liberals would have to lean more into like labor stuff, and I don't think that's going to happen while the NDP still exists. Fortissax, you're going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, like, I know what that comment is in reference to, and people are they're starting to compare the CPC to the Tories in the United Kingdom, which I think is somewhat apt, in that if they replace the party leader with a person of color, with a non, and then they run a 0 seats campaign. I know this was a big meme with the British while the Tories were running in that election. 0 seats, because everything the Conservative Party was doing was extremely widely unpopular. And then what happened? Well, reform emerged finally with Nigel Farage at the helm. Massive popularity, massive support. And then Farage himself started moderating on almost every single position. So there's a slight parallel there with the PPC and the CPC.
Sorry, I'm just bewitched by the chat. Like, I shouldn't even be reading this. This is a serious political stream. We have serious people watching this. I got Needle argument. I have no crack and I must eat pussy. I mean, if just dropping that there without seeing the workshopping, without seeing its evolution, I mean, it wouldn't make any sense. But I feel like I'm part of history right now. This is good shit. We've got Red Grim Nationalist. PPC is even more pathetic than the UK Reform Nigel Farage meme party.
Yes, 100%, 110%. Because the PPC can't even get off the ground.
Yeah. Like reform got off the ground, PPC didn't. So
Like an ideal situation, and I hate to say it because I quite like Maxime Bernier, and I bet there's some very, very good people I know. I remember when I was on Greg Wycliffe, he was involved with the BBC. Daniel Tywin involved with the BBC. I think
Tyree.
Tyree, yeah. I think they need to go away. I think this needs to be the end of the PPC because everyone says, well, the Conservative Party must collapse. I think the PPC must collapse. I think we need to have another run at it. We were talking about a true nationalist, perhaps even further right party. I think that space is currently occupied by the PPC. If it's not going to be that, then maybe we just do a hard reset on that whole thing.
There's no shame in that. Like, how you want to be an entrepreneur, you don't like let your company fail for 15 years. You try it. If it doesn't work, you close up shop and you try something different. There would be no shame in doing that.
yeah.
It sounds like it might be. I don't want to offend any of the PPC people here. I'm just speaking pragmatically. If you want, because the argument for the PPC was always, well, of course it's not going to win, but like the NDP, perhaps it could signal the popularity of certain policies and then be absorbed by degrees into the mainstream Conservative Party as the NDP seems to be dragging the Liberals further left. Okay, so it's our NDP, but it's not even that. And then all the people that perhaps could make a run at it, all the good ones believe that there's no political solution. So I don't know. I think it's doomed from the start because all the cool guys don't want to get into fucking politics. But it also seems that the PPC really dropped the ball by spreading themselves too thin. That seems to be the consensus here, that they wanted to act like a bigger party than they were, and they should have focused on a few key areas just to get seats. And as people have pointed out, that they just don't have any nominees in certain ridings, but maybe it should have only been a few, and then that could have maybe won something.
What Tyree also told me was that, like, I mean, the PPC is a cult of personality, and it's all dependent on Bernier.
And Bernier isn't even cool. He gets he got arrested 1 or 2 times, but he doesn't have the charisma of Trump. He's not like Nigel Farage. Like Nigel Farage goes on Cameo and says "Big Chungus" or "Fortnite victory." Like there is something there. Bernier, he like of course he's a native French speaker, but he doesn't speak English well. Well, he does speak grammatically correct, but his accent is very
strong,
heavy.
It's very.
But my boomer Albertan parents love Bernier, so I don't think that's the issue. I mean, I'm sure he's got lots of other issues with his persona. I don't think that's the issue.
Yeah, I would agree. I can understand him most of the time, but I'm also a Montrealer, so.
Let me just say this: I'm calling attention to Sergeant Suckdown. Thank you for the super chat here. I voted Maxime in the first leadership race over Scheer. However, he's just now splitting the vote. I might disagree with that only insofar as if we look at the numbers, I don't even think the PPC is splitting the vote. Like if all the PPC votes went to the Conservatives, they would still be at like just over 43%. Like they're not even making a dent like the NDP are right here if they're 4.4%. So I think that's the sad truth of it. It's not that they're all the Conservatives freaking out, afraid that the PPC was going to siphon so many votes, but that didn't even happen. You might as well blame the Green Party for splitting the Liberal vote.
In the last election, I don't remember exactly, but if you added all the PPC votes to the Conservative votes, the Conservatives would have only won 4 more ridings, like 4 or 5 more ridings. So that when people complain about vote splitting, like I don't want to vote for Bernier because he's gonna make the Conservatives lose. That's not even a real consideration. And also, before this election, Pierre wanted to kill the PPC. So his main line of attack was like Maxime Bernier, as I believe he was Canada's foreign minister, went to Switzerland with the WEF. And that was the weakest attack ever. So the PPC didn't even die because of the Conservative Party attacking them. They just died on their own because they're pathetic.
We have an interesting comment here from the Drain. So, is this because Trump torpedoed the right in Canada because of his hawkism, which the Libs run a cynical patriotism campaign, not Canadian? Just as a refresher, I think that is indeed what happened. One thing
Yep.
we had talked about on the show was that this was an issue ripe for the plucking. Because remember, everyone who wasn't paying attention to this, you have to understand when Trudeau was still in office and Pierre Poilievre was a contender, everyone was convinced that Trudeau was going to fail. They were talking about Pierre Poilievre as if he was the prime minister already. He was a shoo-in. He was a lock in the election, and that's for that reason. Trudeau stepped down, and here comes Mark Carney. And one thing we had said on our show before is that no one ever loved Pierre Poilievre as much as they hated Justin Trudeau, meaning that no one actually liked Pierre Poilievre. I think as a nation, people got off on bullying Trudeau for quite some time, but that hate of Trudeau didn't translate into a positive response to Poilievre, and so. I said on the last stream I was on, if you want to make some easy money on poly market, put all your life savings into conservative snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Like they could have easily snatched the patriotism talking point, and they just didn't. They didn't want to. They didn't know how to do it. So somehow, by some fucking unpredictable Hail Mary pass, the Liberals became the patriotism party.
The pleb reporter is longing Poilievre. Short it. Dump it.
Yeah, Pierre Poilievre, sorry, the pleb reporter, he was like, we need to get Poilievre in because we need real change. And I'm just trying to be diplomatic here. I'm like, what change? I mean, be specific. I don't see any difference between these parties. And that's what they're campaigning on. Poilievre is saying we need change. I actually don't know what you mean by that.
You might favor the Sikhs instead of the Hindus.
Yeah, he's going to send us off to fight a war in India. My God, can you imagine that?
Our second biggest trading partner.
Zar, please, we need you to go overseas and fight for India.
We've reached the point in the evening, and this is a good time to do this. We're almost at 2 hours. We need more Indian accents. We need more Chinese accents. I want to get some Portuguese accents in the mix. What do you guys got? Wilhelm, I know you're a big accent guy. Go ahead.
I don't know where you got that from. I can't do accents at all. The best I can do is is do the voice I do for videos, which is hi. I don't know. Okay. Sometimes you do an Indian accent now.
I can't even do it. Okay, Fortissax, I'm tossing it to you. You're the Indian accent guy. I did Ray Romano, Jordan Peterson a second ago.
Don't hate India, sir. Let the white man have his country.
It's the pauses that people don't master.
You gotta stop. My inspiration is Osho. If you don't know who that was, he set up a white Jeet ethno-state in Washington State back in the 80s. Very fascinating person.
He committed some bioterrorism, probably.
That's right. Yes, he did. Yeah. Sir, please, I need you to sign up for Canadian military so that you can go and fight for Akan Bharat.
Thank you.
I saw that news story about it was Pakistanis and Indians coming to blows over, the war going on. And I'm just looking at that story saying, I'm voting for whoever makes it so I don't need to hear about this ever again. I don't easy vote. Just say, I don't want to know about this. I don't want to know about India anymore. We're taking 10 years off of knowing about India. Get rid of them and then just blackout that whole fucking area.
So we're halfway done, 53, 58-ish, 53% in places like central Newfoundland, and only 4,000 votes have been counted in these regions. I just wanted to circle back to the Canadian situation. How dispassionate are Canadians about this election? If you look at the last election, only 30 or 35% of actual voters voted. They actually cast their ballots. The vast majority, 3/4 the population didn't even vote. So you got to wonder, how much lower is that now? Is it lower than 30? Is it lower than 35%? I think it could very well be.
I thought it would be a bigger turnout. I don't know why. I detected something more interesting this time. I know no one wants to vote for Andrew Scheer. I know but it felt like there was something at stake here. I thought there was going to be, and maybe it would have taken Trudeau being there. I don't know.
I was gonna say because they dumped Trudeau, which was the smartest thing they could have done, the absolute smartest thing. Like you remember in the last debate, Polyev said, "Well, you're the same as Trudeau," and all this, and Carney looked at him and he said, "Pierre, Trudeau's gone. The carbon tax is gone. Who are you campaigning against?"
That's such a good, like a rhetorical one shot. It's like Trudeau's not here anymore, and then everyone realized, oh yeah, he's not. Even though, it's funny, like how many of those people with the "fuck Trudeau" bumper stickers actually went out to vote? I think that's a good metric because again, it was such fervent hatred of Trudeau that people were buying merch for it. You'd see them everywhere, but I think that was all diffused. Those people are not politically motivated or activated in any particular way. It was just Trudeau. He's gone, and the Liberals knew this, which is why they fucking did it. And then the problem is that they swapped in Carney, so you can technically say he is prime minister. He's the sitting prime minister, so people are already kind of used to him being prime minister. So that's why I was predicting it would be a pretty strong sweep. Even just psychologically, people, I just don't think, like if they're not turning out in record numbers to vote, that signals to me that Carney's in. They've just resigned themselves to accepting Carney.
Mm-hmm.
Last two elections, the electoral map was almost identical. You could overlay the two of them on each other. If the electoral map is the same in this election, that'll be the ultimate indicator of how much this country has just given up on the electoral process, or maybe not given up on the electoral process, but people are just voting for Team Red or Team Blue or Team Orange. Just don't care about what anybody's platform is. It's just pure inertia.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people are actually following the election. Like when Pierre did his little convoy to Ottawa to have a speech about how Canadians are Canadian, how many people actually knew that happened? Because like IRL, I don't know anyone, or I know very few people who actually follow like the campaigns of people. And so, like Fortissax, when you said that the I am a Canadian thing,
Whether
would
your
lose
name
Pierre
is Pierre or
would lose
Patel
Pierre
or
the
Polyev.
election, like maybe among the people who pay attention to that, but I don't know if the majority of the population actually knows that happened.
That's fair. That's fair.
Oh, sorry, we got Mildewed here. Wilhelm, you said you were working on a vacation video like 6 months ago. Where is it?
Good question. That video was about the Quiet Revolution. And like I put out a video about the 1960 election in Quebec, detailing how John Lesage won. Well, how John Lesage won with the support of financial elites. But the script for that video is 47 pages long. And so when I made that, or when I wrote that script, it took like 2 months to write. And then I was only able to get that 20-minute video about Quebec's election out before I said to myself, I should probably like rework this, because this video about the Quiet Revolution is actually about two different things. It is about the Quiet Revolution and also about Quebec's unity with Canada. So I took a little break from that, and then that break turned into a couple months. And I said to myself, I should make another video and not just keep waiting. So I am going to put that video out eventually when I rewrite the script into two separate videos. In the meantime, I have been thinking about releasing that script, the 47-page long one, on Substack separately. That may or may not happen, but We'll see. We will see in June.
I'm really interested in looking at how Ontario turns out. I'm particularly interested in the ring of suburbs around the GTA.
Yeah, what are you predicting there? Because I'm going to be honest, I was flabbergasted by Olivia Chow's election, that they would just elect an old Chinese communist lady. You know what I mean? But what do you think is going to be going on outside Toronto?
I think there's a solid chance that the outer rings of the city might very well vote Conservative, although Ontario has a history of like voting Conservative provincially but Liberal federally, so it's very hard to predict. But I don't know, and like I don't know, Chow, was she actually elected? Did she have significant foreign financial backing? Probably. I think that there's maybe a case to be made that she was put there. I don't know if she was necessarily elected.
Yeah.
Because that's just too obviously, you know what I mean? Like that's just too much of an obvious tie-in to the CCP.
At the same time, does anyone care? Like, if she was elected by the CCP, I don't think people would even like look at that and say, "Oh wow, our country is kind of infiltrated by people who hate us." I think they will look at that and say, "That's not even real." Like the CBC told me so.
Here's an interesting phenomena from non-prom queen. Even my Jeet neighbors are voting blue, and that's something I'm seeing quite a bit of, and something that seems to excite Pierre Poilievre.
Well, yeah, because the foreigners will vote for whatever party they perceive is benefiting them the most, and how well that pays off for Poilievre, I don't know. Trump managed to get the highest number of minority votes in the Republican Party's history by pandering to them, but it was still not as high as the Democrats. So I have to wonder.
Conservatives expect to do well among new voters. I wonder what they mean by new.
I wonder what they mean by well. Right? Is it the majority of new Canadians, or is it a bigger portion of a majority that's maybe 25% of them, right?
And you might. It's interesting because remember the belt of middle class, kind of bougie non-whites that kind of settled in the suburbs around Toronto these days. They're not necessarily thrilled with the immigration policy of the Liberals. Like these people are not above kicking the ladder out. Once they're up and into safety, like and so yeah, you can expect some backlash voting on that. Like there's been some hostility and some animosity because again, if you are Tamil, you don't necessarily want Punjabis flooding the street, and there's beefs and so that again, you can't predict how things are going to play in the suburbs, but I would bet that it's going to be probably more red than conservative at this point. But backlash to immigration, if my read on it is anything.
Ziggy Derp says nuke Toronto. What do we think about that?
No, not Toronto. Oh my gosh, what would we do without Toronto? I don't know. If the Gardner Expressway collapsed, not a single Canadian would die in that supposed catastrophe.
Look, dude, I hate to say it. Toronto, with the exception of downtown, with the remaining red brick buildings that are very clearly like these like Roman. With the exception of downtown Toronto, with all of that beautiful architecture and areas like Kensington, which are just entire neighborhoods of Anglo-Canadian red brick homes, turn-of-the-century homes, like the rest of the city is absolutely dystopian. It's like the most dystopian, one of the most dystopian places I've ever been to in all of Canada. It looks like Soviet Russia. It looks like pictures. I did a little experiment. I posted a photo of an apartment block in Russia, some in some shithole on the Ukrainian border, and I posted a random apartment building in the GTA with like the white sky and the gray backdrop, and it's like spring or like late winter, and nobody could tell the difference. Absolutely nobody could tell the difference. It looks and feels like Eastern Europe, like a totally dilapidated, economically gutted dystopia.
I like Toronto because it's like a zombie apocalypse video game. Every time I try and go and get milk or something, I've got to navigate all these fentanyl addicts. Want it.
I don't know about you guys,
That's my favorite part. It keeps me agile. It keeps me on my toes, and I don't have to buy an expensive video game system, I can just go outside and be, with a bat and be Ash for an afternoon if I want.
I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's the hustle and the bustle.
Yes, no, that I do agree with. That I do agree with. I don't know. Listen, I love the hustle and bustle of the big city. All right, I'm a city boy. I'm a city slicker. I do like trains. I like public transit. I like lights. I like flashing lights and advertisements. I hate to say it. Look, my heart is truly in the rural areas in a nice cottagecore farmstead where I'm, I don't know, raising chickens and cattle. But unfortunately, that's just not me. I'm not that kind of guy.
Yeah, no, you and me are just built different. I was saying this the other day when I went to go see the $1 Million Extreme show in Oshawa, and me and my co-host Judas, we came up in Oshawa and went to high school there, and hadn't lived there in quite some time. But I was driving through, and it's so charmingly Eastern European. Like I'm driving to the venue, and on both sides of me, it's just empty parking lots with just piles of garbage and oil drums. And I thought, yeah, you know what? I like this. I don't know. That to me, that's home to me. To everyone else, I get why Polish people stay in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
I get why Eastern Europe has people in it.
Somebody here in the comments, I lost it, said des nons fam. Tutu's my word, Kroski. Yo, that's Gerbert, fam. That's Gerbert.
I don't like that you took the time to meme on this. Like you had to watch so many videos. See, here's the thing, because I lived in Toronto for a decade. Me and my wife, we had jobs there, and no one was doing the Toronto accent back then. Like this to me just seems like a new thing. It just fell out of the fucking sky one day. And I don't know where it came from. It seems put on. It seems fake. It seems like it's kind of like when you watch documentaries about Toronto Bloods and Crips. It's just a really fucked up, weird copy of America. So it's like, oh, we need an accent. We need an accent so we can be like LA. And it's just this hodgepodge that doesn't make any fucking sense.
Nobody called this place the Six, and then they try to sell Drake as a rapper in the States. He says, yeah, everybody calls Toronto the Six. And
vote kick Fortissax.
It's bizarre to me to watch Haitian and Somalian kids act like American gangsters.
Go on.
No, it's just bizarre. It's exactly as you said. This is like a waft. This isn't a culture that was brought. This isn't a culture that was brought here physically. It's a culture that kind of wafted up culturally.
So I've done a lot of anthropological study on this particular subject, and what I have deduced from the Toronto accent, the emergent Toronto accent, which I have coined Canada, spelt a very funny way, because it's the way they it's the way they pronounce it, Canada. So the Toronto accent is faked probably 75 to 85% of the time by deracinated youth in the greater in the GTA. It's mostly influenced by Jamaican patois, East Indian and Arabic slang, because they'll say, like wallahi, wallahi, that's des nons, or something to that effect. And this is just a total hodgepodge of them. So a select few of them actually sound like that, but the rest of them are imitating them. And people accused Torontonians of ripping off UK roadmen. They accuse them of ripping off African American slang. But the reality is that it unfortunately, it's homegrown. And that's because Jamaicans went to both the United Kingdom and to Toronto. But yes, it's absolutely abominable. It is like I walk into a Toronto Costco, I feel like H.P. Lovecraft.
Evan Patterson says Toronto accent is Kalergi speak. I like that term. Very much so. It almost reminds you of cyberpunk. Michi Peachy says Judas has the most Southern Ontario accent I've ever heard. It's true, and he leans into it. He loves it. Sorry, I cut someone out there.
Wagwan waste you, Batsy boy.
Yeah, when I first came to Toronto, the original accent was Jamaican patois inspired for sure. Now, yeah, I guess you would be seeing more of the other accents coming in. But again, it's really, really weird. I was watching some of these documentaries on the kids in Regent Park and the kids in various parts of the Jane. At one point, a rapper got shot and paralyzed, and they did a dance making fun of the paralyzed guy, and they got their whole neighborhood to start doing it. Like, it's just, it's like something out of Chicago. Really, it's just really, really weird. I think I blame the internet
Honestly, guys, we should be making those dances.
It's a fair point.
Yeah.
But yeah, the gangster culture in Toronto, it's definitely at root Jamaican. I can say that. Yeah, people of all.
So does anybody? I wish we still had Token Canadian here just for a second, because I wanted to ask, like, are the solid red areas on these maps like confirmed? Like, is that confirmed that writing?
Yeah, I think it's solid red confirmed, and then the kind of pink ones
Light.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's probably confirmed by the newspaper, not confirmed by Elections Canada, would be my guess.
Okay. So I can't. What you're saying is that I can't make bait content on X right now, posting about how so and so writing went to. So
Make whatever content you want, but hold off before you start bribing the politicians. Is all I'm saying.
Why is the truth getting in the way of baiting?
Yeah.
Just you can just do things.
Misunderstanding Xer.
Yeah. 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 I think I'm going to.
Evan Patterson, hard to believe Toronto was a 45% English city when my grandparents were born. You'd never know it in my lifetime.
No, when my dad moved to Canada, Brampton was known as where the Scottish people moved.
Aaron Hume says Toronto's moving to the right slowly but steady.
That's not true.
That's 100% true, because it's there's a whole bunch. There's a cohort of middle class South Asian and East Asian business people that are very, very right wing and are immune to any kind of like white guilt rhetoric. So, if you're going to see Toronto go blue, that's how you're probably going to see Toronto and the suburbs go blue.
What I wanted to say was that immigrants, like recent immigrants, are voting. Are probably voting conservative because that is in their economic interest. When the liberals talk about we're going to wage an economic war against the U.S. Because Trump is mean, that is off-putting to immigrants who probably bought a home and have a huge debt and are like, how are we going to pay off our debt, or how are we going to live? So boomers can say, sacrifice against the U.S. while recent immigrants, and especially younger recent immigrants, are going to vote conservative.
If you're a merchant trying
to like the free market,
if you're a merchant trying to pay off a mortgage, you love inflation.
Remember, these are largely import-export based and like service-based, or like high service-based jobs like doctor, lawyer, that depending on how long they've been here. So.
I think red green nationalism makes a good point here. How can you have a gangster culture in a city where the average house price is $1 million?
Okay, so I can answer that. Dotted throughout Toronto is community housing projects, and you need very, very little money to live in one of these, and they are just hives of criminality. Anyone I knew 5 people who did security at these venues. Or these housing projects, all 5 were stabbed at some point. It's just the roughest part. So, and it's interesting, you see Toronto's gang culture is very balkanized because Toronto came of age as a city after the kind of American ghetto crisis. So they said, okay, we're not gonna let like a huge area be ghetto. We'll dot our low income housing all over, and that's why you have all these like little gangs all over Toronto that all have SoundClouds and YouTube channels at this point. But that's how you get it. You got these pockets of criminality, essentially, that funded by the taxpayer.
Yep.
Required says the massive early voting turnout is suspect. Do we think the massive early vote turnout is suspicious at all?
Not ever since COVID, because that's how a lot of people vote now. I don't think it's suspicious.
What it was sold is like, don't wait in line, vote early.
I mean, I also just think that boomers are like hyperactive when it comes to voting. They're like the peak voter. They're the go out and vote. It's your democratic right. You got to go out and vote.
It's your civic duty.
Yep.
If there's one thing that is going to win this election, it's voting. If the only winner in this whole fucking carnival of shit is the god of non-tent.
What I heard is that a lot of people at the polling stations, like the people who work there, are really into the civic cult of voting. So people like the Canadian state receives this legitimacy from like peacekeeping and the cultural mosaic, but the cult of voting is still very real. Like they believe that the will of the people will be represented by the system, that and that you must vote, otherwise you're not doing your part to keep the country stable. So uh, that's at least part of the reason why I believe there's been a lot of early voting.
Now, wait. If you don't vote, how can you complain?
Because all the candidates are all the candidates are Indians, and they don't represent me. That's why I can complain. They don't represent me. None of them do. I was never given a choice. So
Well, it's just like the most politically activated people never vote because they care too much that they just sort of blackpill themselves. It's only the people who just like voting or people who think that voting is important that vote. But the informed people, they don't seem to bother. I think that's one of the reasons. Like, there's a lot of very informed, passionate people who may vote for PPC strategically, but then they just talk or think themselves into. Like, I honestly think that Carney already as the sitting prime minister, everyone looked at that, and the people who know what the fuck's going on said, "Oh, I know where this is going to go. So why even bother?"
mhm.
There's
So
definitely not a
the
lot
little,
of faith in the system right now.
the little poll I put up on my X, the majority of people chose PP brings it home or bloc majoritaire.
And that's because that's the meme options.
I'm gonna post that later tonight. I'm gonna post a Jeb Bush one, and then I'm gonna post the Blanchette like bloc majoritaire.
You don't think the Christian Heritage Party is going to pull it out?
You don't listen. You don't think the CHP is gonna pull it out, or the NPC, the Nationalist Party of Canada, NPC?
Is the Rhino Party still around as well?
Oof. I thought they were Alberta specific.
No, I think they were Canada. I think they, at least in the 90s, was their heyday. Everybody knew about them in the 90s, and the age of air farce, the golden age of Canadian political comedy. I have no idea if they're still around. Let me look this up.
Was the Heritage Front a political party? I forget. I don't think they ever ran for anything. I think they were just like agitators.
One of the things that Blanchet said, that's his name, right? The leader of the Bloc Québécois.
Yes.
Yves François Blanchet.
Traitor.
He said like Canada is an artificial country with no like coherent identity or something like that. And as you, Fortissax, pointed out accurately on Twitter, that's just complete. That's just completely taken from Marxists and the Quiet Revolution. Because at the same time, Blanchet says that the only qualification for being Québécois is to speak French.
Is speaking French,
meaning,
yes.
Meaning, I, as someone who is definitely not Québécois, would qualify as a Québécois to Blanchet. Like that. And it's the same thing during the pandemic when the Bloc Québécois also said was also more radical than the Conservatives when it came to the vaccine passport. And they said Parliament who wasn't vaccinated. So a lot of people say that the Bloc Québécois is super based, or like well not super based, but at least the most conservative party in Canada, which is true to an extent. At the same time, they're also super liberal and like social democrats on like everything else. So
well, because the crowning achievement of the Quiet Revolution was building a
that's all I wanted to say.
Authoritarian state, and like it's the Quiet Revolution is its own post-national revolution. It is its own sort of decoupling from ethnicity
Pardon? I think you're roboting.
Yeah, we're kind of losing
you're
you.
roboting a little bit. Is Fortissax going to be okay?
Hello?
Hey, Fortissax, can you
Hi.
say something? You were kind of cutting out a bit there.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say the Quiet Revolution was its own equivalent to what happened in Anglo-Canada. Basically, the secular leftist groups hijacked the regional nationalist movements, which were formerly right-wing. They were hardcore Catholic traditionalists. Unfortunately, Maurice Duplessis fumbled the ball with his tenure as premier, and they did not pull off the economic growth and the opportunities that they thought they were going to do. The consequence of that was that the left at the time had carte blanche to hijack every nationalist sentiment in the province. And what happened was they decoupled Quebecois identity from any race and ethnicity, any rootedness, any regionalism. Sorry, not regionalism. So yeah, like they have effectively, and here's the thing, like René Lévesque coded his anti-immigration rhetoric by language chauvinism. By linguistic chauvinism, they tried to kick out all of the increasing the immigrants, increasing population of immigrants who were English speaking, but not Anglo-Canadian or Anglo-Quebecois. So they coded this into, well, if linguistic chauvinism is what defines French Canadian identity, and if you don't speak French, you're out. The problem is his political descendants believe that. They took it and they ran with it. So now the entire Bloc Québécois and the Parti Québécois all believe that the sole defining factor of French Canadian identity is speaking French. And that's where it came down to. Now, implicitly...
So would barbecue in Haiti be Quebecois?
Well, unfortunately, a not insignificant number of separatist nationalists would say that. They would say that because they identify with the francophonie, the sort of French version of the Anglosphere. They identify with that kind of international organization where it's like, oh yeah, and you have to understand too that the revolutionary leaders of the Quiet Revolution also identified with the Palestinians. They identified with the Irish, the communist Irish Sinn Féin or Sinn Féin, with the Bretons, the Breton communists in France in the 60s and 70s. So the Quiet Revolution and modern Quebec nationalism are fundamentally anchored in this kind of like what was originally patriotic socialist, Marxist-led convergence, turning into authoritarian democratic socialism and civic nationalism. Is it better than what's going on in Anglo-Canada? Yes. Is it only marginally better? Yes. Because after Canada signed Mulroney, it was funny we were talking about Mulroney earlier. After Mulroney signed the 1988 Canadian Multiculturalism Act, Quebec countered with the 1992 Quebec-Canada Accord, which gave them the exclusive rights and privileges to control the total amount of immigrants coming to their province and have greater control over where they came from. So they mostly selected for francophone immigrants from former French colonies like Vietnam and in Haiti, Algeria, so on and so forth.
About southern Ontario, or like the belts around Toronto, a lot of the new developments are just fully housed by new immigrants, and so you get, like, I think around Aurora or Newmarket, it is like I don't know if it's 90% new immigrants, but it's like a lot. And it's because that's the only reason that's the only area where they can buy property, I'm pretty sure, because like new developments are like cheaper. And so the further, in a way, the further you get from the center of Toronto, the more non-Canadian it gets. So like, actually, if you take a look at the map, at the riding map, you will see that like Brampton is fully the ridings in Brampton have a lot of Indian candidates, but you move to like Mississauga or Etobicoke, there are more white people. So
I rented
the Greenbelt to move all of India in.
I rented an Airbnb in Etobicoke almost 10 years ago. And we had a wild party one night that lasted to 4 in the morning. My buddies and I split it 3 ways. We, brought a bunch of girls over. We blasted some music. We all got absolutely plastered. And at 7 o'clock in the morning the next day, TPS comes to our door, Toronto Police Service. And here we're thinking, oh boy, there was a noise complaint. We're going to get kicked out of the Airbnb. It's over, right? And he's like, oh, hey, we just wanted to let you know there was a shooting down your street. We wanted to make sure everyone was okay.
You just checking in to see if you were shot. That's like Canadian police shit. Like if you've ever had to deal with the police in and around that area, don't even bother calling them. If you got shot and called the police, they would be there by the next morning saying, "How's it going there, bud?"
Did you see that there was like a small conspiracy about America doing a color revolution with Bernier because he would be the most he would be the candidate who would be the most accommodating to America. And so when Bernier went on Carlson, and there were also some rumors about him going on Joe Rogan. Some people thought that this was America's attempt to color revolution Bernier into office. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But one of my thoughts about this is if a color revolution actually did happen in Canada and Bernier was the what's the word, the op, or was the person who would be supported by this color revolution, it would not be such a bad thing, because if Bernier were competent, he would and do what America wants, which is to wrest our sovereignty over the Arctic. It might be a way to, in the long term, get some of Canada's sovereignty back, because
it wouldn't be any more. It wouldn't be any more of a reduction of sovereignty that we already have.
Yeah. But one of the anecdotes I use to support this is that and this is like going to be really obscure, but in the 1903 coup in Serbia, Austria-Hungary initially supported the Karađorđević dynasty because they believed that the Karađorđević dynasty would still support Austria, but they ended up turning to Russia. In the same way, the United States might support Bernier, thinking that he is going to make Canada more compliant with America, when in the long term that turns out to not be true. Do you think I'm right?
I mean, it's entirely a possibility. Like we discussed earlier in the stream, Bernier's problem, his fundamental problem isn't the specific policies, it's the libertarian ideology that he brings to Canadian politics. And that's just, Canadians are just not a liberal people. They don't believe in unregulated free markets and limited government constitutionalism. They just don't. Many of them might say they do. Many Canadian liberals might say that they're liberals. They might say that they support that, except every time it comes to key issues like guns, like free speech, private guaranteed private property rights, there's always a caveat. There's always a notwithstanding clause. If anything, if he wasn't successful, it would be for that. I don't, I think that if the Americans pump that much money into a more temperamentally Canadian candidate or politician, I think that could succeed, and I don't think that Canadians would necessarily go against the grain.
We're a country that declared martial law over honking.
Yeah.
Locked out bank accounts. We're a country with a monarch on our currency. Like, there's just something in the, and we look at the Americans and their unfettered freedom, and we just say, "Oh, I'm glad that's not up here." Like the sober northern neighbor. So at least that was the traditional Canadian kind of view in my experience.
If it was up to me, I'd implement some reforms, but I wouldn't go the full 9 yards of total constitutionalism. I'd scrap the Patriotism. I'd scrap the 1982 Constitution. I'd rewrite it, but I wouldn't go the full, this secular holy document that cannot ever be changed, ever, full blown so and so. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't do that.
Well, we used to brag that the post-apartheid constitution of South Africa was based on our constitution. We don't seem to be bragging about that anymore. I wonder why.
So someone had made a good comment earlier in the chat, and I've just been paying attention, and we just threw up some news covering the election. If you don't watch TV often, this will be startling. It's mostly women, isn't it? Like it's like 80% women just on TV generally now. I'm just saying that's fucked up.
It seems that way. It seems that way.
It's all a bunch of fucking broads having their period about this goddamn election.
I was checking some of the local city, some of the regional city subreddits just to see what was going on, and it's just leftists panicking. It's just libtards having a fucking meltdown.
Okay, send some of that in the chat. We need to be on Reddit. We got to be looking at threads.
So, okay, we're gonna just go up Toronto subreddit.
Also, every woman you see on TV, you know that she cares about her opinions more than her husband.
You know what? That's the thing. Women have not had. They haven't been on the firing line on this stream at all. And if that was on the ballot, if there was an anti-woman candidate, I mean, then we're talking voter turnout.
Especially in Toronto, yeah.
Well, look at what happened to was it who they lost the House after Biden was able to keep the House because of the abortion ban, or from the drug. Like it shows you when issues affect women, women come to the polls. But in my experience, women are less likely to vote ideologically, more likely to vote based on their current circumstances, that affect them directly, and their gut feelings. That's typically in my experience.
And how many women in Canada are employed either directly or indirectly by the government? Because it's a fuck ton of them.
Yeah.
So, okay, Wilhelm, I would be remiss if I did not bring this to your attention. There is a mind revolution occurring in the chat right now. Something about, will you comment on the Zed situation? Have you been following this? I looked away for 5 minutes. I don't know what the fuck these people are on about. Does anyone?
No, I'm not really looking at the chat either. Can someone do a quick summary of the Zed situation? I have no idea.
It seems like a meme that's gotten away from us. It's just this guy, Empicol, when God made the world, he gave all the world to Zed Shabib. Is that something? Does that mean anything to anyone?
When God made the world, he gave the Christians, Muslims, and Jews the choice to choose the most beautiful woman. Christians got the first choice, and so they picked the most beautiful woman. And Jews picked the mids, and Muslims were left with the ugly ones. And so Muhammad said, wear the hijab. That's what I think about the Zed situation, basically.
There's a good comment here.
Instead, I guess you got to have them young as well.
I like this one from Nicholas. PPC votes would surge with women if you put serial killers on the candidates. Really, why has no one thought of that yet?
We need... no, I'm not going to say that. Never mind.
What do you think that says about our evolution? That
I was going to say we need someone.
We need our Luigi?
No, there's a certain Canadian someone with certain allegations.
Oh, okay. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Our most terrible security incidents with our politicians involve like pies and milkshakes usually. So I wouldn't. Again, it goes back to that law-abiding nature of Canadians. Like we're like the freaking, we see ourselves, I think, as the good subjects for whatever reason.
Now, Fortissax, I do hope you're finding us the worst Reddit threads right now. Someone needs to be
currently trying to.
But why would they panic? Because at this point, I'm pretty sure Carney's going to win.
No, but you don't understand. Pierre Poilievre is literally Trump. He is a dictator who's going to take away women's abortion rights. And
he's going to grab them by the pussy.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love just the idea that people are not at all paying attention to the election and they just think Trump is running in the Canadian election.
The great tragedy of Canada is all the stuff that wafts up from south of the border, like the cultural stuff, the bad ideas. If I had to sum up, Canada's, tragic flaw, it would be that.
But we need to follow somebody.
Yeah.
Ideally, it would be the British or the British Empire, but
Germans seem to know what they're doing sometimes. I don't know. Not after Merkel.
Also, I just want to call attention. Luke Magnotta, or Luke, was the guy's name Luigi?
Luca Magnotta.
Yeah, but there's also Luigi. Luke Magnotta. Was Luke Magnotta a serial killer?
Luca Magnotta was the guy who was because he lived in my freaking neighborhood in Toronto.
He was the guy who was like eating someone. Was that it? Or?
He eventually killed a guy on camera and then uploaded the video to the internet. But before that, he was like killing cats on the internet. So he was like this horrible, hated person online. And then he actually killed a guy, and then he escaped to Germany. And the German police caught him, and he was looking up, he was Googling his own name in an internet cafe when they caught him. But it's weird because he had all these modeling gigs, and he was on reality TV, and it was just, very, very strange. It was like, see where that went. The worst killer in that neighborhood, though, was the Santa Claus guy.
Bruce MacArthur.
That was great. That's the one time when I've had to be worried. It's like there's a serial killer snatching big dudes. I'm walking home late at night after work, and it's like I'm looking over my shoulder because there's some nut that just disappeared, some 6'4" guy. He was all buff. And anyway, Toronto's a colorful city.
Okay, here we go. We got some here. Sorry, Token Canadian is back.
Hello, everyone.
We're looking at people being upset on Reddit. This is what we play for, really.
This is it. Well, if you're not looking at Reddit, what are you looking at is the real question.
Look at this.
No.
I love you don't call this being suicidal, but it's suicidal adjacent. The rational calm response is to let go of what you can't control and do what you can to tolerate the uncertainty you're feeling. Everyone's a fucking psychologist on this godforsaken site, right? Everyone's got advice.
Well, you know what? I don't have a very high opinion of the Greeks, but you know what the Greeks say: you tolerate what you deserve, what you tolerate. So
you what the Greeks say? One gay sex, please.
I almost spit on my drink. I wasn't ready for that.
You know, every Greek person I've ever met has been completely homophobic and yet oddly proud of the Greeks' history of doing that stuff.
So we got Token Canadian back. He's in the mix. I really want to leverage your expertise on this. Have you changed your mind at all since leaving and rejoining? Where are we at? Any thoughts on the election so far?
I think if the current numbers continue in Atlantic Canada, we are definitely looking at a Liberal minority, not a majority. Majority looks out of the picture currently for Atlantic Canada, but some of the things we're seeing in Atlantic Canada are very regionally specific. Like I said, when I left in Nova Scotia, there was one seat called for the Conservatives, and they were leading into Liberal seats. And I said if they flip those seats, it's specifically down to the lobster fisher dispute in Newfoundland that's going on right now with the natives and their overfishing and fishing and breeding seasons because the Constitution lets them. And we've seen 2 seats in Newfoundland flip against the polls over this dispute, which is very localized. Whereas in PEI, where now all seats in PEI have been called for the Liberals, and Nova Scotia, where in Cape Breton Casino, they were running the Minister of Finance for Nova Scotia, and in PEI, 3 of the 4 seats, they had very good star candidates. In New Brunswick and Fredericton, they had a very good star candidate there too. All the Conservative star candidates across Atlantic Canada have lost. But in Newfoundland, where they had really no star candidates, they've all beaten the polls over this regional issue. So I think don't extrapolate too much right now. It looks like Newfoundland, the flips in Newfoundland are specifically regional, and the rest of Atlantic Canada is going as polls expected. Local candidates having no effect, which means for the most part, the rest of polls will be right. We have no calls outside of Atlantic Canada, so it's early, but possibly if this continues, maybe no Liberal majority. Still too early to call.
We talk about how democracy is kind of a retarded system, and there you go. The real takeaway about the results in Atlantic Canada is a fishing dispute with the natives.
Yeah,
in one province, yeah. Well, we saw this in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia, in Sault Ste. Margaret or whatever in 2021. The
This
Conservatives
comment-
weren't expected to win that seat. They flipped it over the same thing, like the same fishery dispute, but in Nova Scotia that year. And they were able to actually unseat the Minister of Fisheries over that dispute unexpectedly.
Hold
So
on,
you guys
let
want
me
to
read this
see?
comment.
You
I
guys want to
wanna
see
read
some
it.
absolutely insane liberal cope in
I
this
love
country?
it. I love whatever's happening.
The conservatives are backed by Nazis.
Let's see.
And if you haven't been paying attention to what's happening in the US, if PP gets elected, we will be far from okay. Harper already set us back 50 plus years on science by burning tens of thousands of documents and data and opening the floodgates for corporations. If you look at the back and forth of Grits and Tories in Canada since Confederation, while the Liberals have held for the majority, every time the cons get in, life gets worse for the middle class, better for corporations, and we will take steps back. Under Libs, things get slightly worse for the middle class, but better for corporations, and maybe we take a step forward. And remember, Canada has only really been an independent country since 1982. Before that, the British Crown shaped policy and legislation. This is so fucking wrong. If PP gets in, we will make deals that benefit the oligarchy and the U.S. and life for anyone who is not. Oh my god! Anyone and life for anyone who is not a straight white conservative Christian will get demonstrably worse, just like it is in the USA. Okay.
No, wait. Is this exactly like Munich in 1938?
Well, can I just say, I always talk about this with my buddies, but we always have this thing we say that I wish just for a day, not even forever, not just eternity. I wish for a day or a week or a month, we lived in the world that these people think we live in. Like when they're like, Canada's this fascist genocidal state that's run by white nationalists. It's like, please, can we have that for a week? Just a week. Just a week, can we live in this world that you think we live in? Like it's actually astonishing how delusional these people are. Like you are winning, you control all the major institutions and establishments, and yet you have to create your own boogeymen to try to convince you to keep fighting. And it's like I wish we lived in the world these people say we live in.
Let's do it just long enough to get a few pipelines built and maybe a little more infrastructure, and then we can have them.
And then call it a day.
Oh, look at this. Not all cons are Nazis, but all the Nazis vote conservative.
Oh my god.
If only.
The Nazis I've known have not voted.
Yeah.
Look, some of my best friends are
remember the last
Nazis.
time I voted conservative, so that should tell you something.
Well, Pierre Polyev is like Hitler because he's fumbling a war that he could have won. So,
So I'm supposed to sort by new. I haven't used Reddit in a long time. So
Well, we have some breaking news about the Canadian election. The Conservatives have been elected in a seat in rural Saskatchewan. How exciting.
Okay,
Yeah.
hold on. Here we go. We have some more reporting in here. Yeah. What else do we got here? Then we've also got
Blue lead in southern Ontario. Barrie, Wellington, Guelph, Brantford, and Flamborough.
Yeah, all Conservative held seats. Haldimand Norfolk is Leslyn Lewis. I think. Do we all know who Leslyn Lewis is?
Yes.
Yeah, that's her seat.
Interesting.
So
We got some Jesus. We got some orange leading in Alberta. Leduc, Wetaskiwin.
yeah, that's one poll.
That's good.
Edmonton's interesting though.
I want to end the stream at least when the
Government
majority of
jobs.
seats. Pardon? At least when the majority of seats are reporting. Not now. Maybe at 10:30. Anyways, go on.
Edmonton is like any other city full of government jobs. People vote to save their jobs. I don't know why people think Edmonton is going to be any different than any other largely government city in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem with
exactly
Edmonton is at least Ottawa is majority European Canadian. Edmonton is a government city filled with Indians. Like mass demographic change. Like if you look at the south and the northeast the southeast and the northeast of Edmonton, and just Edmonton in general, but specifically those areas targeted, the demographic change rate in those areas is like ungodly. like the average boomer, if they heard about the demographic change rate in those areas, would actually be upset. So Edmonton will probably, if the Liberals are actually polling at 28% in Alberta, like people say, which is mainly fueled by demographic replacement in Calgary and Edmonton, you're going to see a very large overperformance by the Liberals, specifically in Edmonton, but that might also spill into Calgary.
But why does, like, in Edmonton and in some other cities, like I know in Edmonton and Calgary, some of them vote for like some ridings vote NDP. Like
the NDP came out of Saskatchewan. There still is a large regional, like we want to talk about how Canada is just fundamentally a conservative country. 60 years later, 60 years after Tommy Douglas, people on the prairies they'll vote conservative or NDP, but not liberal. It's just, that's how set in their ways, and that's how much regional loyalty there is in this country.
No, Ben has a point. Ben has a very good point there.
I just realized the Green Party leader is no longer that black woman, but rather...
No, she hasn't been in charge forever. Elizabeth May came back, and now she's sharing it with a half-black guy from Montreal.
And that the black woman was kicked out of her position for, drum roll, anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Actually, she was kicked out for not being anti-Semitic enough. She was Jewish herself.
Right.
Good.
Still, I don't care. The fact that
they're all bad, they all need to go.
The pro side or the anti side, like,
It means we're going back to a very old way of doing business.
Yeah.
If my read of the situation is at all accurate.
Even if she was anti-Semitic, she was a black, not anti-Semitic enough or whatever it was. She was a black Jewish non-binary. People like that have no place in modern, or should have no place in our political system or our nation, for a larger concept. But yeah, it's good that she's gone, but it's the Green Party. What do you expect? These are the people that, like in England, when the Greens were elected at the local council in Kent, they were screaming Allahu Akbar and like putting on the fucking Palestinian scarf or whatever it was. It's like the Green parties are some of the worst parties on earth.
This is the party that in 2000 got George W. Bush elected. Had a margin, had a few Greens showed up in Florida for the Dems. We'd have a whole alternate history.
well, at least there wouldn't have been an Iraq war.
And I've always hated Elizabeth
May, yeah.
She's Canada's crazy aunt, and I remember she walked a group of like crazy 9/11 truthers onto the floors of Parliament and was like, hey, these, deal with these people's petition. So that's
Elizabeth May herself is American. People forget.
Yeah, I know she's from Connecticut.
That makes sense. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
She's American. Actually, when she was in university, she talks about this. Besides talking about the fact that she believed in her imaginary friend until she was 20, she used to sign her imaginary friend's name on all her legal documents. She talked about this.
That is fucking wild.
Yeah.
That's a healthy adult.
When she was in university, she was at the same university as Bill Clinton. She talked about how she had a crush on Bill Clinton and tried to bake for him to get him to sleep with her. And she said, even he wouldn't sleep with me, which is a testament to how atrocious that woman is, that even Bill Clinton wouldn't touch her.
So, I mean, she could run it. That's sort of like the inverse of the Sargon thing. It was, I wouldn't even rape you. It's like, I couldn't even get raped.
Yeah.
By Bill Clinton.
Wouldn't even rape you. Like it's a testament to her. It's actually impressive that even Bill Clinton didn't want to touch her. But that's our Green Party leader. Someone I saw earlier in the chat, someone was talking about the Christian Heritage Party. The Christian Heritage Party is also run by an American that talks about how Canada was founded by Judeo-Christian values. So the Christian Heritage Party is not the solution to our problems. The People's Party, which is run by a socially progressive, until he needs to not be, libertarian French guy, is also not the solution to our problems. Like, people forget this. In 2017, when Maxime Bernier was still a conservative and running for conservative leadership, he said the idea of a Canadian values test for immigrants was unrealistic. He said that we needed more privately sponsored refugees. He said that immigration should be increased so we could have more workers. He marched in a pride parade, and he did all these other things in 2017. And then when 2018, 2019 came around, and Andrew Scheer made it clear that either you step aside or we are going to rig you out of the nomination in your seat and we'll just find someone else to replace you. Max took his toys and left and said, well, I'm going to start my own party because I'm not going to get rigged out of my own nomination. And then all of a sudden in 2018, after talking about all these great things about immigration, then we have multicultural ghettos. Then immigration is too bad. Then, cultural diversity isn't a good thing. Maxime Bernier is the biggest grifter in Canadian history. He deserves to get less than 1% of the vote. Earlier in this stream, I wasn't able to talk about it, but earlier in the stream, we talked about what's the place for the PPC. And I think Fortissax made a very good point that there's no appetite for people like the PPC. There isn't. The PPC is this libertarian, socially liberal, like gay kind of semi-anti-immigration party, not even really anti-immigration party, and there's no appetite for that in Canada. Canada is not a libertarian nation, so there's no appetite for that in Canada, but I don't think there's any appetite for that kind of libertarian party anywhere in the world. Like, the PPC wouldn't be successful anywhere, not even in America.
You're telling me people are tired of line go up before all else?
I know. I'm being very revolutionary here with my takes. I might get banned. I don't know.
Well, it's funny, who a few years ago wrote an article saying we should be using things like values tests for new immigrants was Aya Hercele.
Yeah.
And she said, I don't say this lightly. I'm a beneficiary of the system, but we have a system currently that was set up during the Cold War. And the world's changed sort of a little bit, I guess, less since 2020, or 2022. But so if anybody, if you ever need to make that point, and you need a Somalian lady who was a refugee to make that point for you, you can cite her article.
What's kind of crazy with the PPC is just how incompetent they are, because with every party, they have like a semi-formal news outlet. Like, you can say that the Liberals have what's it called? Not the Toronto, like either the Toronto Star or the Toronto Sun, and the Conservatives have like their newspaper and so on. Like, each party has like a sort of informal media outlet. The PPC doesn't organize anything outside of their party, and this might be kind of extreme, but like during or before the Spanish Civil War, like the Carlists had dances where like Carlist supporters would go to, and it was like a cultural phenomenon. There's
like
there's nothing with the PPC to like culturally engage with.
Well, like the Germans have that song Ausländer raus. I mean, even something like that, if the PPC could get a 3-minute song into the zeitgeist, that would win a lot more than Bernier going on some American podcasts and spreading the gospel of libertarianism.
I think his biggest issue is like I wouldn't go as far as to say that Bernier and the PPC are totally afraid of controversy, but I would say that they're not controversial enough to garner the media's attention, which is really the only way you're going to get noticed and out of this sort of media black wall that he has been confined in. Bernier doesn't say or do anything controversial enough to get the cameras on him, even if it's bad press, right? But that bad publicity, quote, if it's not bad enough, it might just galvanize people and support them more for the PPC. Max just isn't that kind of guy. He wants to be well-liked.
Yeah.
He's afraid of...
And for me, I'm just very cynical in politicians generally. I don't think, again, with the exception of maybe Trump, but most of them never lead the charge in anything. They're reflexive. So, a song like Ausländer raus is a fantastic example because I don't think that was coined by any particular leader. That was a generative, organic thing. It spread, had a runaway train. It was a fire. It was exciting. And that's not because there was one puppet master. We expect to find this leader that will just energize everyone. But really, we just need the people to energize and call forth some kind of leader. So in that sense, Maxime Bernier is exactly representative of his constituency. I think there's that specific amount of people who are interested in libertarianism. You know what I mean? Or that form of like socially liberal, financially libertarian. You know what I mean? But he's their tulpa. They called him forth. And so we can either choose to do that ourselves, to make something that energizes a person to fucking appear. But other than that, they're not going to appear.
If Reddit is saying that Pierre is practically a Nazi, that means that Bernier wasn't trying hard enough. I hate to say it.
Well, can I just say something? I don't want to be the guy on here that's like, oh, actually, you're wrong. But with Bernier, he didn't even appeal to his constituents. He was all the polls in 2019 had him winning his seat, and he ended up losing by 10 because he doesn't have the connection with his constituents. Beauce, which is a rural dairy producing riding in Quebec, didn't like the idea of this libertarian pro-American idea of abolishing supply management, which means that our dairy industry and our poultry industry completely just cease to exist and become American owned. Bernier, the reason why Bernier isn't successful because his brand of politics doesn't connect with anyone. No one believes in this weird libertarian French socially liberal ideology. And if you poll PPC people the same way like in England with Reform UK voters,
It's
which
not
with,
French.
with Nigel Farage's weird libertarianism, Thatcherite, like neo-Thatcherism, majority of Reform voters support like economic nationalism, like government intervention, government ownership of natural resources and all that. And it's the same in Canada. Majority of PPC voters support government intervention in the economy. They don't support libertarianism. And the majority of potential voters for the PPC are like I said earlier in the stream, disenfranchised working class people in Southern Ontario, Northern Ontario, Atlantic Canada, British Columbia, and also middle-class suburbanites who are seeing demographic change on their front doorstep and seeing the crime increase and just the unrecognizableism of their neighborhoods firsthand. These are the people that the PPC or a party like the PPC in theory should apply to. But then the PPC goes to them, and I'll pull it up right now actually, and I'll read the flyer that the PPC in my riding sent to me. Give me 1 second. I have it right here. Foreign aid. Here, hold on. Foreign aid. Canada first. Stop foreign aid. Balance budgets and cut waste. No more lockdowns. This is the 2025 PPC literature in my writing. No more lockdowns.
Well, I mean, what else did ChatGPT give them?
Did they just not update it, or like who's responsible for that?
This is the PPC candidate, the literature that they're handing out door to door to. So every voter in my riding that gets a PPC literature, they get Canada First, Stop Foreign Aid, which is what the Conservatives are saying. So they got outflanked by the Conservatives there. Balance the budget and cut waste, Conservatives. No more lockdowns. Who the fuck cares? Preserving Canadian values. No explanation. Right of self-defense at home. Remove the capital gains tax, remove overtime tax, remove carbon tax, no DEI and gender ideology for kids, reduced but efficient government, meaningful incentives for startups, negotiations instead of war, stop foreign interference, and many more. It's time for us to take our country forward. That's what the PPC is campaigning on. They're not even talking about immigration. In an election where a nationalist party focusing on economic disenfranchisement, our manufacturing was sold off in the 80s, and now it's continuing to be sold off and crushed slowly by slowly, killing our small towns. Many people don't know this. There's a town in Quebec called Gagnon. It had about 4,500 people, and it was a coal mining town. Because of Mulroney's free trade deals, the coal mining company decided to close the factory there in Quebec and move it to America because it was cheaper. And that whole town doesn't exist anymore. 4,500 people are gone. That town is gone. That's what free trade did to us. And it's continuing to make ghost towns and destroy our major cities and destroy our manufacturing cities. Instead of the Nationalist Party talking about that, they're talking about further doing that. Maxime Bernier says that we should actually have more free trade deals with China. He said that as PPC leader, not just conservative leader.
Yep.
And instead of talking about immigration, like mass demographic change, which is like 56% of Canadians said there's too many non-whites in Canada, not too many immigrants. 56% of Canadians in an Abacus poll, mainstream poll, said there are too many non-whites in the country. Instead of the PPC talking about demographic change, their star candidate is Jeff Lal, an Indian Fijian immigrant from wherever, running in Brampton East, who took Maxime Bernier to a Sikh temple in Brampton East and put the dot on his head and the turban and make him take his shoes off and whatnot. That's the PPC. Instead of talking about immigration and economic disenfranchisement and decay, they're talking about maybe we should have more of that and more Americanism. Like the PPC is not a real nationalist party.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. If we're talking about ideal outcomes of this election, forget the Conservative Party. I would like to see the PPC collapse. And I think we need to take another run at it. There has to be something else because, as you said, the numbers appear to bear out that there is something like populist support for the migration question, which nobody is talking about. One person perhaps could have talked about it. You're more likely to hear that talking point from the fucking NDP at this point.
You're more likely to hear it from your neighbor. You're more likely to hear like the fact that 75% of Canadians said in a poll during this campaign, with no major leader talking about cutting immigration, 75% of Canadians said that they want immigration cut from 500,000 a year. This is just permanent residents, not talking about temporary residents. Cut from 500,000 a year to 100,000 a year. So if 75% of Canadians want it to 100,000, that means at least 50% would probably support it less than 100,000 a year. Like I said, 56% of Canadians, or I think it was 57% or 57 or 58 said there's too many non-whites in the country. 56% said minorities need to do more to fit in. Over 60% of Canadians said they believe that immigration is causing a negative effect on public safety, and close to 60% said that immigration has a negative effect on social cohesion. Canadians don't support mass immigration. Canadians don't believe diversity is our strength.
Dimes made an entire video documentary on this exact phenomenon. There's 100 years of public opinion polls and data indicating that Canadians never supported immigration at any point, going back to like 1910.
Yep.
It has been forced on the country since the 1940s. But what I wanted to ask you, Token, so some of these polls are live election results. They say 8% of polls reporting. What does that mean? Is that like does that mean?
So the way it works is like I'm assuming besides me and Wilhelm, the rest of you guys said you voted, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You went to you know how you went to the polling station and you voted there? That polling station counts as a poll. So when all the votes in that polling station are counted, that counts as that poll is reporting. So there are multiple polling stations around your riding, depending on the riding. Like here, I'll pull up one that I'm just looking at right now.
So Globe and Mail is reporting 8%, which means that there's really no way to predict any provinces or areas turning a specific.
Yeah, no, it's way too early. Like out of all the seats, 22 seats have been called for the Liberals, 11 for the Conservatives. So only 33 seats out of 343 have been called. So it's still way too early to tell.
So when you say it's not possible to call, like if in a riding for the last 2 months, every poll has been like Liberals 55%, 54%, 55%, 56%, and then they took an exit poll today and it was 54%. They're going to call that one right away.
Right.
It's about the volatility of the polls leading up to it just as much as anything else.
So the way they make the predictions,
this regional breakdown on
polls and previous results.
So this regional breakdown on Globe and Mail, like the solid red, blue, etc., are these not reliable? That these are like 100% bona fide seats that have been given?
So like I said, it's dark.
If it's dark, that's guaranteed.
Unofficial.
Okay.
So if it's dark, unlike in America where they rescind calls every once in a while, Canada, it's very rare. Also, I just like to make the call. Maxime Bernier has officially been defeated in his seat. Beauce has elected the Conservatives. 57%. As of there's still a lot more votes to be called, but they can call it for the Conservatives. 57% Conservative, 22 Liberal, 14 Bloc, 5 PPC for Maxime Bernier.
We won. Awesome.
I'm looking at
We got
PEI
to celebrate
right
now.
Four seats are all red. They're dark red. Does that mean that the Liberals have solidly won the island of PEI?
Yeah, PEI has elected all Liberals. Every seat in
Okay.
PEI has elected a Liberal.
So the
already.
entirety of the Maritimes is basically just going to the Liberals.
PEI, yes. Newfoundland, the Conservatives beat the polls just because of that local fishery dispute with the natives, whereas the rest of Atlantic Canada and the Maritimes, like Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland and New Brunswick, the polls are right. So Newfoundland and Labrador, Conservatives beat the polls over the fishery dispute, but PEI, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, polls are almost 100% right.
Sorry, Wilhelm, just to interrupt. We have a question that's been asked a couple of times, and I promised to get to it. Wilhelm apologizes. Do you think a restoration of the Order of Orange in Canada would be good for cultural monarchism?
This question has been asked a couple of times by like the same person or by different people.
By the same person, but that's why I just want to get to it now, because then it's going to be asked 5 times.
The Orange Order, to my understanding, is Presbyterian. At this point, I don't know how many actual Presbyterians, like committed Presbyterians from where is it, Northern Ireland, there are to actually maintain it, or like
The Presbyterians.
I think that's out of the question.
Else these days.
I think it's out of the question. It's not going to happen. Maybe, and to my knowledge, it still exists as a organization, so it's not dead. At the same time, it may as well be.
They're also very entwined with Freemasons. Like most members of the Orange Order are also members of the Freemasons, and they have like joint meetings. Like the Orange Order is not this like based, as the youth would say, based organization or whatnot. Also, I don't know how many people here know who Cian Bexty is. Does anyone know?
I went to
famous
school
journalist.
with him. I don't just know who he is. I know the guy.
Yeah,
At least
his
he-
dad is the Conservative candidate in Bow River, Alberta. So he most likely, his father will become a member of Parliament.
Now I'm gonna take the black.
He's also not heterosexual.
I'm gonna take
he's not heterosexual, and just like the leader of the AFD, he's in a homosexual relationship with a Sri Lankan.
So I'm going to take the black horse opinion here and say that, unlike the United States, only 5% of Canadian Christians actually attend church once a week. So, the foundation for religious monarchism is just not here anymore. Especially, it's just not there. There's no.
That's just common sense.
Yeah.
I'm Nietzschean. I'm a Nietzschean pagan, so I support Wotan. I support. I can do whatever I want because I'm master morality. That's why I'm a monarchist, by the way.
No, but real. That's literally my position too. Token, can you explain why Miramichi has not been called yet?
Okay, so in Miramichi, that is a seat currently held by the Conservatives. The former Conservative MP there. So Miramichi was a marginal seat from the beginning. Like 2015, it went safe Liberal because 2015 was a wave year. The Liberals got almost 70% of the vote in Atlantic Canada. 2019, the Conservatives lost Miramichi by 500 votes, which is very close. That was because Andrew Scheer disqualified 3 Conservative candidates in that seat in a row because the candidate he wanted didn't win. So the Conservatives didn't have a candidate there till the last minute in 2019, and they ended up losing by 500 votes. 2021, the Conservatives nominated a very popular potential premier, local member of provincial parliament, as their candidate, and he won the seat fairly easily. This time around, he was going through a divorce or something, and she was taking the kids. I'm not even trying to be funny. And he had a mental breakdown, and the local Conservative Association forced him out. And so last minute, they were forced to, like a week into the campaign, they were forced to drop him and renominate someone. And so they decided to pick another fairly popular member of provincial parliament to be their candidate. But this is a week into the campaign, so it's fairly late. And also the Liberals are running the lady that was the MP up until last election who just lost. So they're running the former MP from just like a few years ago. So both have pretty strong candidates. It's always been a marginal seat. And so that's why it's so close.
Very interesting. And can we guarantee that the majority of those maritime seats, once again, have been called for the Liberals?
If they're dark red, they're called for the Liberals. So dark red means they're called. Dark blue means they're so dark red means Liberal, dark blue means Conservative. If they're light,
Okay.
that just means they're leading there.
Because I keep getting people asking me if this is confirmed. I'm like, yes, this has been confirmed. The Liberals.
Yes,
Again,
if
it's
it's dark
confirmed
red
by the
map,
newspaper.
if
It's
it's a
not
dark color, it's
official, but
confirmed.
it's confirmed by the newspaper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can't trust Globe and Mail or even Toronto Star.
We, for the most part, we can. America does rescind calls. It's very rare in Canada that they rescind calls. Canada's more reserved. Our media is more reserved, so they'll wait longer. Like there's times where it's like very clear that we call a seat, but they're going to wait until it's almost completely sure to call that seat, so they don't.
We do elections very quickly.
Yeah, you know, because like here's elected and leading, and that's where the light pick is. But then there's just the elected. That seems to be the confirmed ones here.
Yes. So there are 15 elected Conservatives, 23 elected Liberals, and 2 elected Bloc. I'd like to say one of the 2 Bloc elected is Louis Plamondon. Louis Plamondon was one of the first MPs for the Bloc back in the 1990s. He left Brian Mulroney's cabinet to join the Bloc Québécois, and he is still a member of Parliament and is continuously elected to Parliament. He is he is actually the longest serving member of Parliament, and he has been reelected in his seat tonight.
Sorry, hold that thought. I need to read one super chat that I missed before. You're more likely to hear about the race and immigration from Ebonic-speaking Canada youth in the GTA than the PPC. Sorry to interrupt. I gotta make sure I get to these super chats. Sorry, continue.
No, that was all.
I think Henry Rye is still an MP as well. If you want to talk about people who just really need to collect their pension and disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they let Hazel McCallion be mayor until she was 100. She was showing up to events and she could barely walk, and she was still like running the city at what like it was. Like there's these weird little cult of personality that pop up around these local politicians, and in Guelph there was one of them, and it's just because so few people vote. These little churches, these little cults of personality can have these huge effects. So.
Well, with Hazel McCallion, I won't say what profession my family's in, but my grandfather, because of his line of work, had to interact with local politicians a lot, and he had to interact with Hazel McCallion a lot. And he used to say that most politicians took bribes. Hazel McCallion was different. She took bribes that he wasn't able to afford to give. That was the difference between Hazel McCallion and most local politicians. That's why she stayed in so long. But it's just like you get these cult of personalities around like these very milquetoast people. Like I think Pierre Poilievre,
like Mark Carney,
Mark Carney too. Like, what's there to like about this guy? This guy, he's not even like he's this intellectual banker. He's this banker that can't even speak properly. Like if
he looks like a guy in a Viagra commercial.
He looks like a guy that should be in a lobotomy commercial. He was talking in Quebec.
Somebody pointed out that he looks like Peter Mansbridge, like vaguely. I'm wondering if there's something to that.
He looks like an old school Canadian politician. This is the Liberal Party going to the Boomers and saying, business as usual, guys. Sorry about that Justin kid. We let that get out of hand. Look at this boring guy.
Yeah,
that we're putting forward. It's just as good.
So we have a good question here from Seabass. Why does the North vote Liberal when it is more rural? I'm retarded, America brained. That's not.
Should I explain?
He's wondering why the North is more.
So it's not. It's not even an American thing. Like Americans have this like rural urban divide, and it's very pronounced in America. So I understand why a lot of Americans don't understand this. So in Canada, a lot of the northern seats are very native and or working class poor. Yep. And the Conservatives don't really offer much to them. Like Poilievre tells the natives that they need to stop caring about being poor alcoholics and just learn what a work ethic is, which whether or not he's right on that, But yeah, pull them up by the bootstraps. And for poor white working class people in the northern areas of Canada that have lost their mines and forestry industries because of conservative free trade deals, they look at the conservatives and go, well, I used to have a job and then you got elected and you signed a deal with America and now I don't have a job. Why the fuck will I vote for you? And the conservatives are like, well, we're going to allow the free market to thrive. And they're like, well, we've seen what the free market does. And so in northern communities, like in Timmins, for example, which is that big seat in the northeast of Ontario, like a jug of orange juice is $23 because that's how expensive it is to live in the north, because there's no infrastructure in place to ship anything up there. There's no jobs either. So not only is things more expensive, but people also have less purchasing power. So when they're presented with the liberals that are like, we'll just give you free money, or the conservatives that are like, we're not going to give you jobs, but we're also going to tell you to get a job, obviously they're going to vote for people promising them free money.
To ship anything to even Winnipeg, even like a hub in the middle of nowhere, is prohibitously expensive.
Yep.
If you're not shipping gold watches by the container load, you're not going to make your margins back.
No. Ben, our regional prairieite, is 100% right. He knows what he's talking about, and it's like in like the fact that like imagine for Americans, like this is like 1933 Germany. Like a jug of orange juice is $23. Like what are you talking about?
Even
$23. Imagine going to the store, $23 down for a jug of orange juice.
Do they get the northern nutrition benefit? Because I know in like the Northwest Territories and stuff, it's like the government pays for 50% of your food, or at least they were at one point.
For Northern Ontario, I don't think they get that for the most part. They get something similar, but it's not 50%. And
Wow,
the problem
look at that.
is the reason why it votes Liberal is because the Liberals and the NDP promise that, but the Conservatives don't. The Conservatives just want, like you said, free enterprise.
Dude, northern half of southern Ontario is leaning red. That's whack. I would have expected the Bruce Peninsula to be blue.
But isn't it going to turn blue
That's
soon?
still early days.
Requited in the chat saying Global is calling a Liberal government. His wife is watching live.
The bloc has flipped a seat in Quebec in Gaspé. That is a bloc flip from the Liberals. The Liberals have lost a seat in Quebec.
A Liberal victory depends on how many votes that the Bloc Québécois can siphon from the Liberal Party.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The Bloc overperformed the polls. The Liberals don't get a majority.
Mm-hmm.
We need to talk about how everyone in the Conservative Party is gay. Token Canadian.
Oh, you want me to talk about that?
Yeah.
Right down to Kean Bexley, right?
Well, Kean Bexley isn't even the tip of the surface. I don't know how detailed I can get, but as someone that, like I've said before, nauseously, that I've worked in the Conservative Party on campaigns. I've been a member. I've been a delegate. My personal opinion, this is very anecdotal. There's no polls to show this, but I'd say about 70% of Conservative Party members are homosexuals, from what I've experienced firsthand. Like when I was at the Conservative Party convention, at the age of 18, so I was barely an adult. And myself was invited to like 3 or 4 homosexual orgies, not just normal like Roman type orgies. Like these were exclusively male orgies.
Think of the networking opportunities, gentlemen.
I just have one question before you go on. Do you think that's disproportionate when contrasted against the Liberal Party? Could it be that there's more gay men in the Conservative Party?
Very possible.
So it's just because they all went to school at Upper Canada College.
I was gonna say a lot of these guys go to like these effete boarding schools where situational homosexuality just seems to be part of the curriculum, and I bet a lot of this goes back to that.
St. Michael's College, which is like a private high school here in Vaughan, Ontario, they had a big scandal on their hockey team that the initiation ritual was you had to let your teammates sodomize you with a hockey stick, and that was the only way you get on the hockey team there. So yeah,
I'm so glad you ended that sentence with their hockey stick.
Hockey.
Well, that was it.
We're afraid it would be weird and gay.
wasn't gay. But no, with the Conservative Party too, and like I was getting invited to orgies at my first ever Conservative convention at 18. I don't have an ego. I'm willing to admit I am not like any prize winning pig or anything. I'm not getting any ribbons at the festival or
You're not the
anything.
gold star brap hog or
So,
anything.
And they're
listen,
just inviting anyone to those things.
listen,
That's how,
I
like,
get
gay
a,
the
I
party
get a, I get a regular gay sex update from the Blood Satellite podcast. So we can
Thank
just
you.
circle back to the election right now.
Of course.
What about it?
Alberta has just elected another Conservative.
It's over for Pierre Poilievre. He's in the Fuhrer bunker. Der Krieg ist verloren. The war is lost.
He's in the Diefen bunker. It's over.
Well, I don't know. Hold on. Can I, Dimes? You said to send you any things that we could post on stream. I'll send you the picture I sent to Wilhelm.
My leader, axe the tax was not an effective policy. What? Axe the tax? That was an order. Axe the tax was an order.
Let me send it. But it's if anyone's ever seen the scene of Downfall, when Hitler's outside awarding the Hitler Youth, someone took that picture and edited Pierre's face, and it's like Poilievre greeting conservative voters in Carleton before retreating back to conservative HQ.
You're gonna love this.
You know what? Like, I know we were trying to move on from the gay thing, but like, is that a very real problem for like getting men into this shit? Because I recall a line that Nick Fuentes had of America First when he had hired Milo Yiannopoulos, and he was defending hiring Milo Yiannopoulos, one of the most treacherous individuals you could ever imagine, by saying, if you want to do anything in politics, you got to work with the gay guys. You got to bring them on. And I think that's the accepted wisdom in mainstream politics. If you want to get serious, you got to bring in a bunch of gay guys. And then with that come the orgies. And I'm just like, is that one of the main reasons that keeps men like ourselves out of this entirely? Like, I don't want to fucking get involved with the Conservative Party of Canada if it requires that.
Can
There was
I
an
give
AIDS
my?
outbreak in the Vatican in the 80s. You do the math on that one.
I wouldn't say that's the
didn't-
main reason. I wouldn't say that's the main reason. I think there's a lot of it, but it's not necessary. I think it's the easy way that, like, a lot of these. I talked about it with Wilhelm. We spoke before, and I said the reason is that one of the things that attract people to politics is power. It's not a good reason for attracting people to politics, but that's the reason why a lot of people get attracted to it. So it only makes sense that a lot of closeted homosexual males who lack power in life will look for something that gives them complete power, which is politics. That's why they're so disproportionately represented in politics. I don't think it's a necessary, though. I think we can have like an organization where we don't have gay orgies and be politically viable. Like, I don't think, like, if we're going to accept having a nationalist organ, we need to have like Roman orgies. Like, that's not necessary. We don't need to do that, guys. Don't worry. We can do it without that.
The issue with gay guys is because they network together very, very well, they become a power block in any organization you're dealing with. We used to call, even in organized crime, you think about how homophobic, like the various, Toronto gangster communities are. And we had to call these guys, we called them the Velvet Mafia.
Yeah, the Alphabet Mafia too. Yeah.
It was just this group of like gay gangsters who were networking through, various bathhouses and wherever the hell else they were doing it. But it's just something that if you want to organize, it's just something you're gonna have to deal with. I don't know why. It's just happens again and again and again.
It's how it is in society, but we shouldn't just accept it and be like, well, we have to have them in. We can try to have them without.
Well, even look at the early Nazi party.
Ernst Röhm.
It's just like Hitler's bodyguard, I believe.
Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA.
Yeah, he was, I think, a gay bar bouncer, and at one point there was all these anyway.
Yeah, but eventually there were very, very long nights with and everything was solved eventually. But I've said this before, like I said about the center right parties being the biggest threat to the right. Like nationalism biggest
So
obstacle.
we have breaking news right now. According to
Right.
Global News, nobody wins. There's no more election.
No democracy. Nobody wins. Putin is president. Did you see that people were trying to say that the whole power outage in Spain was because Putin did it or something? And it's like, oh yeah, Putin was trying to stop the biggest supporter of Ukraine, of Spain. Like it's just
Not
ridiculous.
enough. Freaking do that. Like, there's lots of things Putin would love to do, and he's a boogeyman. He's just at the end of the day not a competent character.
No, like,
We have the
he's
Toronto
not
Star here. Liberals win. Like I'm noticing that these maps are just not refreshing. And
Yeah, same thing as the CBC. I guess they're all connected to the same, website at the back end. And just like, in true Canadian fashion, when one goes down, the whole network goes down.
Well, I can update everyone because I'm in touch with everything. I have the voices are telling me the results, but currently there's 28 elected Liberals and 21 elected Conservatives, and
It
4
looks like-
elected members of the Bloc Québécois, including the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves Francois Blanchet, has been re-elected in his seat.
Total Bloc victory. Bloc majoritaire.
Yeah, the Bloc have gained a seat and they've re-elected their leader. Also, the Liberals have taken the lead in Atlantic Canada. That Conservative minority looks unlikely now.
Jeez.
Yeah, so I guess I know we actually need to get going soon. We had a sort of hard exit at around 10:30. I didn't think we'd make it. I didn't think we'd actually get the conclusion of this entire election within the stream, but we did at Reddit.
Yeah,
We did.
But
Liberal government.
I have some things I want to say before the stream ends.
Absolutely, you should get the final word.
First is that the reason I wanted to do a stream, and this is going to sound spiteful, but there isn't, to my knowledge, any other Canadians who are doing a live stream about the election. And when you look at the American election, like everybody's doing a live stream, they're doing a watch party. So I wanted to do one for this, for our Canadian election, even though I believe that elections basically don't matter. As I've said before, there were elections in the Soviet Union to legitimate the government, but most of the time there were like 1 or 2 candidates on the ballot. Do I believe that this election matters? Like, no, if you know what I mean. Like, absolutely not. It doesn't matter who wins. You're not going to get a different. There's no change. Like, Pierre says, "Vote for me." You're going to get change. Like, that's not going to happen. You're the same as Carney. Second, for this reason, during the stream, I didn't want to talk about the election so much as I wanted to talk about Canada, because of course the election doesn't matter. But I feel like we've talked enough about Canada. Like the goal has been achieved. We've had a stream about Canada, talking about Canada, this past, present, and future, which is what I wanted to talk about. Third, this is going to seem like I'm bashful or like I don't know, like I'm a little embarrassed. But before the stream, I don't know. I didn't know if I would be good at doing a live stream. I think I was quiet most of the time, but because I haven't done live streams before, like everybody else on the panel, except Ben has. Like, but Ben does this podcast, which I recommend you watch. He has a good podcast called Radio Free History. It's awesome. But for me, I didn't do a live stream, or I haven't done a live stream before, so I was a little worried how it would turn out. But I think it was good. And that's all. Thanks. I thank everyone for coming. Before the stream ends, everybody else can have a final word, but don't be afraid to show your stuff.
Good point here.
If
And I got some stuff pulled up here for the majority of the people here. So Ben, you can go ahead if you want. I got your.
Just saying, my final word is we've learned today that whether it's the outcome of the vote or whether it's the orgies going on at the back calls of the conservative election, in either case, politics is gay.
Yep.
I just want to say, guys, like, if you look at the history of an organization like the Muslim Brotherhood that caused so many problems, they started as an organization that planned soccer games. That was the start of that. So that's how they were able to organize under, totalitarian governments that were out to keep very close tabs on them. Think locally. I know that sometimes the problems in the world seem really, really overwhelming, but take that. Instead of thinking, in a big way, think about what you can do locally to build community, and help each other out, and make the world a little bit safer for people to think.
Or for us to think, at least.
Yeah.
Fortissax?
For sure. I'm going to shift the tone a little bit and say that nothing is ever over until it's over. The fact of the matter is that there is not much of a difference between the CPC, LPC, NBP, or the PPC in their politics and their ideological leanings. Vast majority of it is almost identical. That being said, potentially a conservative victory is buying us 5 to 10 more years of time. Pierre Poilievre's immigration numbers are 250K, which sucks. It's still obscenely high. The Liberal parties are 400K. The PPCs are something like 50 or 100K, and the NDPs are likely the same as the Liberals. Is this election a decisive factor for Canadian sovereignty? Is it decisive for the existence of Canada as a nation state? No, most definitely not. It's not going to be the last election. But yeah, just hold on. Keep fighting and have faith. Have faith that everyone will succeed.
Yeah, and Token Canadian, I didn't have anything drawn up for you, any links to anything. So if you would like to direct anyone anything or shield anything, you can do so now.
Oh no, I don't have any social media.
Oh wait, there are two things to do. First, there won't be a VOD because of the fact that I don't want my channel to get taken down or to have a strike. Everyone did well, by the way, but there are some comments that I don't think you two would like on my channel.
I can keep it up on mine if you want. I don't give a shit.
Well, if you get a strike, that's on you. You can keep up. You can keep it on yours. That's fine. But also, the artwork of Désir le Grenouille, please pull it up, Dimes, because I said that I would show it, but we didn't get to it to the stream. I may as well show it now. But
yeah, just a second.
Is there a way?
Yeah, hold on. Oh fuck! Can you? You can pull it up on yours if you share the screen. I was going to check his Twitter, but he doesn't fucking have it up on there, does he? Hold on.
But is there a way to show only the image on a stream?
You can show the you did earlier where you had that one image shared in sort of the photo viewer.
Yeah, but that's in the photo viewer. I'd like the image only.
Harrison Faulkner tweeted 2 minutes ago, "It's Polly over, guys."
He's a good guy. I've met him before. He's decent.
Can you?
Dimes, I just DM'd you the picture on Twitter.
Okay, cool. Just give me a second. I'll do it. Oh, there he is. Oh, he sent it to me. Tell you what I'll do. There, boom. Here we go.
Actually, I changed my mind. Don't keep the bot up on your channel.
Here we go. Here's the image. Moment of silence for this fucking image.
Thank you. Thank you, Désir le Grenouille. Awesome work. I guess that's it.
This could have been the background. I am imagining a possible timeline where the entire stream was different because this was the background.
Yeah.
If only.
I just want to know if anybody under the age of 30 gets the reference.
Well, yeah, obviously that's Millhouse on the right.
I think this really was the millennial election. This might be the last millennial election. It's very late. No one's making any sense. We're going to cut this off now. All right, everyone. Thank you. The chat's just full of fucking retards at this point. So I'll see you guys later. All right. Have a great